Texas in the
It's time for Operation Domination. Guess what, guys? For our first episode of today's new season, we're going to be going over some news and rumors, of course, the Combine and what is important about the Combine or not, and a little positional analysis reaction to who jumped over where. So let's get into it on this episode of Operation Domination.
Operation Domination is underway. The ultimate game plan to dominate your NFL experience. With your hosts, Dan
You gotta be confident about your Achilles when you
Chase
show up.
Thornton,
Yeah, I mean, I got an Achilles.
Chris
Hearing
Dowhouse,
about Mr. Pointless in fantasy.
and Adam LaRue. Don't hope to win. Be great and dominate.
All right. We're back. We haven't been here since before the Super Bowl. It's good to be back on the mic, kicking off a brand new season here in 2025, Operation Domination. Thanks for tuning in wherever you are listening and checking out our videos on the Fantasy Football Advice Net. That's at FF Advice Net now on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell notification to get notified whenever we have new content available for you. I'm your host, Dan Mater. If it's your first time joining the show, I got my partner on the left of me, or I'm all mixed up because I'm looking at a mirror image here. So I got Adam LaRue on whichever side that you're looking at this thing on. And then you got Chris D here. And of course, the man, the myth, the legend. You've seen him on the Baseball Straight to the Chase podcast. Here to do a little football, Mr. Chase Thornton. What's up, gentlemen? How we been with this little downtime? It was only like 3 weeks, but it felt like a hell of a lot longer than that.
I feel like we're officially into the new season, Dan, where like we have the first, that draft kind of taste with the Combine. We've got free agency of right around the corner. We've seen trades. I feel like football in the offseason has begun officially.
Yeah, football's all year, man. It's just all year. We had that little 3-week window, but even then, I don't know about you guys, and hopefully you did the same thing I did, but I spent my entire time scouting prospects and getting ready for pre-Combine, and now we have post-Combine. But before we get to the Combine, we had a lot of breaking news over the past few weeks and some big names that we got to get to. All right, so what we have here, we're going to start off talking about the Rams. And, there was a big thing during the Combine. Matthew Stafford, was he staying? Was he going? Would they figure out a way to make it work? And we'll kick it off with that. Now, I will say this before we get into our reactions. There's still no real details definitively on the contract that are available. We have some roundabout numbers, but as far as the minute details, I don't have that for you. But all we do know is Stafford is locked in. It sounds like it's going to be at least a 2-year deal here for Stafford. So not just this season, but probably 2026 as well. So Stafford staying. Let's go with Adam first. Adam, what's your reaction to this?
Yeah, it was always weird to me that this was such an issue. I mean, it seems like it would have made sense for all parties. The Rams were hot, the second half of last season. They were a really solid team. And one that was, I think, successfully kind of resetting after they had gone all in for that Super Bowl a handful of years ago. It seemed like they were successfully resetting. They got really young and talented on the defensive side of the ball, and it seemed like they were kind of doing similar things on offense as well. So for them to be like brinking on a reset, it just seemed like really odd timing. So I'm glad that they at least brought Stafford back. I'm hoping that they're able to do the same with Cooper Kupp. Obviously, there was some weird things going on with him at the end of the season, so we'll see on that front. But at least Stafford, I'm definitely really glad is back because he played some really good ball last season.
Chris, when you look at this situation, what's your fantasy reaction to all of this? Stafford stays in the Rams. What does that mean for Nacua, Kyron Williams, maybe Jordan Whittington if Cooper Kupp wasn't to stay? What do you take?
Well, I think it's pretty definitive in my opinion. Maybe things could twist, but I think Cooper Kupp's going to be on his way out. The contract, the things that have been said, I think it's going to be moving on for him. And to that point, Dan, I think you've heard a lot why the Rams might have moved on from Matthew Stafford was they want to kind of transform what their offense has been about. I think Puka's going to be fine. We know Matthew Stafford, as long as he has the guy that he likes out there, he's going to target the shit out of him. We also know that Kyren Williams has been a guy who's been a steadfast back, and that backfield has been very productive for them. We know that they want to kind of lighten his carry, so I don't think Matthew Stafford necessarily being there or not being there is going to change either one of those guys. But I think what you're going to see, though, is going to be interesting to see, are they content with a Jordan Whittington or a Rod Robinson as a second receiver, which they've kind of struggled to feature over the last few years, or are they looking for something to kind of upgrade or even do more two tight end sets in his offense? So I think it's not really going to change a lot for Puka or Kyren, but I think Matthew Stafford will still be a guy that maybe the volume won't be what we used to.
Well, not even just the volume, because I'll jump in there. I mean, Stafford's been pretty irrelevant for at least one quarterback leagues for fantasy purposes anyway. I mean, the guy was QB 18 in 2023 on a points per game basis. He was QB 26 last year amongst qualified quarterbacks on a QB basis. So this isn't so much that we're excited about Stafford. This is way more to do about how excited we are about Puka Nacua and these other guys. Chase, before I move on to my Nacua take, do you have anything in reaction to this you want to add?
No, I mean, I agree. I think this is their best, I think for the Rams, for the periphery Rams, I'll call them, it's the best option that could have happened. I mean, they're not breaking in a new quarterback. I know there was Aaron Rodgers would love to go out there. Yeah, that would have been a complete cluster, I think, in my opinion. I like the fact that Stafford's back. I like that for Nacua. I like what it means for their running backs. And hey, yeah, they struggled a little bit past the ball without Cooper Kupp in there in terms of, finding that other guy to throw to. I'm still not buying into any Los Angeles tight end for that matter. I mean, we all know my stance on Tyler Higbee, but I don't like any of the rest of them over there either. But yeah, I like Stafford coming back. I think that's going to help out Puka Nacua. I think Kupp is gone. I agree with Chris there. We'll see where he ends up. I think he still has a little bit left in the tank, but he's definitely not the fantasy superstar. No matter where he goes, he's not the fantasy superstar that we all have known and loved for the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, well, here's one to kick it off to, and I'll see what you guys think and chime in, but this is going to be my big take to kick off the 2025 season, and that is I have Puka Nacua as my wide receiver 1 overall. Now that we have officially know Matthew Stafford is going to be the starting quarterback. Now, this is partly due to the idea that we haven't had a receiver go back-to-back 1 overall since Antonio Brown. It just simply has not happened. So that's part of it. So it'd be hard, I think, for Jamar Chase to do it, even though he's fantastic, even though he's with Joe Burrow. I'm not trying to take anything away from him. But Nacua was second from week 7 to 17, when he came back from his injury. Second to only Chase at that point. He had 34% target share with Cooper Kupp on the field, still getting 24%, even though his performance had been down. That's not nothing. So even with a target earner on the team, Nacua was being targeted beyond elite. Like 28 to 30 is elite. 34 is beyond elite. We're talking like Nacua. I think Malik Neighbors got there at one point, but when you add that in, I'm looking at Nacua. I think he's going to have a CeeDee Lamb-like season from 2 years ago, where he's just going to get fed all the volume, but he's an efficient receiver who can score, and the entire passing network is just going to funnel through him. That's what I'm anticipating here. If you want to argue with me and saying, like, well, his knee injury is concerning, he's been a little bit banged up last season, and that's why I don't necessarily put him at number 1, I'm not going to argue with you too strongly over that. But I do think you take the injury out of it, I don't see why this guy's not going to be the wide receiver 1 overall. Anybody want to retort to that?
I think it's a little strong. I mean, I definitely understand where you're coming from. The target share, of course, if he got that target share through a whole season, if he's going to project it, he's going to shatter all kinds of records. Having said that, he's been healthy since when? In college, he was banged up. His first 2 years, he's been banged up. And I think is something that you have to kind of take into consideration.
He started all 17 games in 2023. His rookie year, he did not miss any time at all. So I thought that was important to point. To your point, yes, he did get banged up in college. He missed 6 games this past season. But he did get through an entire healthy year and rookie year, which is why I think there is some argument to be had that he could potentially do that again.
Now, just to finish off real quick, where I think you do have the chance for that to happen, though, Dan, is does he make the Ahmad St. Brown jump and leap? Because touchdowns have to also increase. He's had 6 touchdowns back-to-back seasons with all those target share you're talking about. So that's where St. Brown, we saw him make that huge leap to become in a discussion of that receiver one. Can Puka do that as well? Like I said, I think his offense is trending into be a little bit more run physical and kind of, they're going to utilize Puka, don't get it twisted, but I just wonder if he's going to be able to sustain throughout the entire season with his injury history as well to be at receiver one.
Well, Cooper Kupp was a big red zone target. If he's gone, then that could be a big opening for Nacua. Speaking of Cooper Kupp, let's go into that conversation because he is somebody right now. The GM came out today and said the least likely option is that Cooper Kupp returns to the Rams. So our question here today we're going to try to answer is Cooper Kupp traded or released? Chase, let's go to you first on this one.
I think there's several teams out there maybe that could benefit from trading for him. I haven't looked at necessarily dug into his contract situation to figure out, how it's going to affect and if he's cut, if he's designated as a post June 1st released, all of that kind of thing. One place I would like to see him go if he went somewhere, I think he might be a nice veteran safety blanket type option for a guy like Drake May up in New England. I would really like to see them have somebody like that May can grow with. I made the comment 2 years ago with Bryce Young down in Carolina that I liked the idea of Adam Thielen down there helping him out, always being that veteran presence who is going to be where you need him to be when you need him to be there and help a young quarterback grow. So I'd like to see something kind of like that there. I would like to see him somewhere like that, though, with a young quarterback to help out in terms of, where I think he would be the best fit NFL-wise. Fantasy-wise, is that going to be a giant jump for him? I don't know. New England hasn't necessarily been a cradle or a hotbed of fantasy-relevant wide receiver play, no matter who's been the quarterback there. But that's one place, that's one destination I wouldn't mind seeing him go.
Well, and Adam, I'll kick this to you. So first of all, trade or release, because Chase took the Miss America way out and decided he didn't want to answer the actual question. That's all good. That's right. You waved down there at the bottom. But so first, trade or release, and then do you think Cooper Kupp has anything left?
I don't know that he's going to be the Cooper Kupp that we've seen, but I do think he has something left to offer. I think he's a big body who's going to be at the right place at the right time. I think he understands where he can sit down. I don't know that he's going to be necessarily a man beater at this point in his career, but I think he can find spots in zone, for example. And again, I just think he understands the game well enough to do that. From a release or trade perspective, I do think he's going to get released. We're talking a 20+ million cap hit this year and next year, and one that the Rams can get out of relatively easily. There's always the opportunity for him to get traded and restructured, but realistically, I think this is a scenario where he gets cut, and we're talking about him getting signed by a team like the Ravens, for example, is a team that I think would be super interesting. I actually think obviously, he's not Mark Andrews. He's not a tight end. But I think that role, in terms of being the safety blanket for Lamar Jackson, would be really enticing for him. I think there's other similar situations. The Steelers, for example, I think they need someone who can be consistent so they're not in such of a box. That would suck for him, for Cooper Kupp owners. But for the Steelers, right, they're getting they can only throw the ball, chuck it up to Cooper Kupp. They need to consistently move the chains throwing the ball to be effective as an offense. And that would be a way to do it, to get someone that you can rely on underneath.
I think you just hurt Chris's feelings on that one.
It would hurt my feelings, but for the Steelers, you have to agree it's a net benefit, right? Like that. If I'm the Steelers, I look to make that move. If I'm Cooper Kupp, absolutely not. But what are you gonna do?
I just feel Arthur Smith getting his hands on Cooper Kupp, we'd never see him again, Adam. For me, Dan, real quick for that one, I would love to see him on the Texans. They have the coaching staff. They just brought it over. The offensive coordinator has familiarity with Cooper Kupp. I think he'll fit in as that tandem role with Nico Collins on the second receiver as Tank Dell kind of recovers the next 2 years. Stephon Diggs can move on. They have easy. They can kind of plug his money in. Stephon Diggs kind of played that role as that underneath guy, as Adam talked about. So I think, to me, that would be one of the better fits.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there, Chris. I think he does have something left. I mean, we don't know how healthy he was down the stretch, right? And we can make the arguments to say, look, you're playing. We have to judge you as if you're healthy. That's all fine. From weeks, again, 8 to 17, because he returned a week later after Nacua, and once he went down earlier in the week or early in the year, he was wide receiver 32 on a points per game basis, and again, a 24% target share. So it's somebody who still could be a target earner. He was at least a wide receiver 3. And we'll see if he can get going again. And Chris, kind of to your point, I have him, his best fit, a Rams OC, maybe replacing Godwin in Tampa Bay, something along those lines. If that were to happen, kind of makes some sense to me. Just to clarify, his cap hit is $29 million this year, which is a big reason why the Rams want to try to get out from under this if they possibly can. But I think he's got something, but he's not going to be. When we talk about Cooper Kupp come this summer, and just in a redraft fashion, we're not going to be talking about a guy who we're taking in the first top 3 rounds anymore. This is going to be a PPR guy who maybe we take a shot on later on. But let's move on here. So we want to talk a little bit about, of course, Deebo Samuel being traded to the Washington Commanders for a 5th-round pick. And there's a lot of NFL and fantasy fallout here on this one. I know. I'll save my opinions for last. Don't you guys worry. We'll get there. So I want to go back here. I want to go back to Chase a little bit. So when Deebo Samuel gets traded for a 5th-rounder to Washington, a lot of people reacted to that. What was your reaction to that?
Well, I forget who it was. I saw somebody on Twitter that said, I continue to be, I continue to be proven. It continues to be proven that I have no idea what the value of an actual draft pick is anymore in the NFL. Because at first glance, you want to think, well, Deebo Samuel, he's been kind of a star. He's been a good player for them, and a 5th-round pick doesn't seem like a whole hell of a lot. And it's such an unknown by the time you get to that point in the draft. But when you look at his health history and the way things have been going there, I mean, yeah, I guess a 5th-round pick makes some sense there. It didn't shock me that they moved on from him. With everything that's been going on there, they kind of a little bit of a soft reset maybe in their receiving core there. But I like the idea of him as a compliment in Washington to Scary Terry. I like that move there a lot. From Washington's point of view, I think it was a no-brainer. Yeah, bring the guy in. He doesn't have to be the man. He can be, like I said, the compliment. They won't, I don't think, be relying on him as much in the backfield over there. So I think that he, that bodes well possibly for his health, so he won't be banged up. I liked the move. I liked the move on both sides in terms of, like I said, getting out from underneath it in San Francisco, but also bringing in a nice compliment in that pass game. Somebody that another toy for Jayden Daniels there. It makes me like him even more going into next year.
So Adam, to follow up with that, did you look at this as a situation where, hey, Jayden Daniels, he wins big. He wins big on this one. Is that something you saw in this setup, or is this something where it's like, yeah, you got better, but I don't know if this does much for you at the end of the day?
I lean towards the second. I'm there's a bunch of ways this could go. I candidly, it's like, all right, you were out of shape last season. That's the reality of the situation. You were. You're now 29 years old. It becomes increasingly more difficult to get back into shape as you age. Not to say you cannot do it. If you do it, I think this can be a really big win for the Commanders. But I personally, given his injury history, given who he has been, I'm just going to bet against it, to be honest with you. I think he is someone who, due to the nature of this offense, they're going to get the ball out quickly. They're going to get the ball out short. They're going to take the easy completions, and that bodes well for what he is going to be capable of doing. But let's face facts. He was not necessarily the most consistent catching the ball and getting open even underneath at periods last season. So I'm not exactly sure how much this is going to help. I think that there's a chance he can be a yards after contact, yards after catch demon for the Commanders. It's certainly a possibility. But I would be, just as easily not shocked if this is a flame out situation where Deebo's just not very relevant come next offseason.
Yeah, just to give some stats here, Deebo had a 19% target share. That was the lowest since his rookie season. he complained constantly about having less opportunities. He only had 3 less opportunities in 2024 as he did in 2023. So he had his 8.3 yards after catch per reception, which is the lowest he had since his rookie season. He had 3.2 yards per carry, which was his lowest in his career. It was just inefficient across the board. Now, Chris, we could talk about, was it the pneumonia? Was it the ribs? Was it the calf? But I feel like when you talk about all those things with Deebo, well, that kind of comes with the Deebo package. Maybe not pneumonia, but the rest of it, him missing a handful of games, that comes with it. And let's not forget, he was a fat tubby lub at the end of the year here. The Adams point of not being able to get back in shape. So I don't know. Do you think he has anything left?
I do, Dan. I think the only chance he had to kind of show that he has something left, I think, went down for him. This is the perfect fit, I think, for Deebo Samuel. Look, Adam, he's not throwing. Jayden Daniels was throwing to Zach Ertz, Quentin Zacchaeus, Dami Brown. Go through the list of guys he was throwing to and how horrible they were, but they were getting yards and targets. So all you have to do is give some of those targets to Deebo consistently. I think this makes Kingsbury's offense easily flow. They can continue to misdirections. They can continue to kind of use jet sweep actions and Jayden in different ways they've been utilizing them. I think for Deebo part, we know, Dan, you're as a 49er fan, you're lucky as hell that you got something for him. But having said that, Deebo's motivated. Deebo does try to play. He can show out, and he has 1 year to be motivated to try to get his contract, to try to show out for this 1 year. After next year, long term, I don't want to part of Deebo Samuel. But for this year, I think this is the position for him to kind of shine. Everybody's going to give him all his kudos all season long. He'll eat himself out of the league next year. But this year, I think that you have a good thing for Deebo and a great situation for him to take advantage of the Kingsbury offense. And I think Jayden actually buys himself an extra year as well from getting exposed.
I do agree that this is the best fit Deebo possibly could have landed into, but I think it's, to Adam's point, it's harder to get back in shape as you get older. And this is a guy we've had to question his work ethic. He's going to have to prove it, plain and simple. I'm going to want no parts of Deebo Samuel next season. He's been on a downward drift ever since 2021, and he's had multiple opportunities where he should have been motivated and could have been motivated. And he'll do it for a gamer here, but he has not been able to put together an entire season since 2021.
Dan, let me ask you this question back, because I like I said, I think you're not throwing to Zach Ertz is going to be just get 8 yards different ways, whatever, but you're still going to throw to Deebo. My question for you is, does this affect Terry McLaurin? Because that's a guy that I would be concerned about fantasy-wise going into next year and for the rest of the panel. Terry McLaurin to me is a guy that kind of had to be schemed and made sure that we didn't forget about him week in, week out for that Washington offense. With Deebo, who likes to bark, as we talked about, demanding the ball sometimes, is that something that you have any concerns about?
The Deebo addition doesn't concern me about Terry McLaurin. The fact that he had a ridiculous amount of touchdowns for his expectation based off of his volume is what scares me about Terry McLaurin having regression next season. So whether Deebo is on the field or not, it doesn't really matter to me. I mean, because when you look at Zacchaeus, Noah Brown, Diami Brown, they combined for about 160 targets and 1,200 yards. So here's what I will say about Deebo is that even in a down season like he had last year, he still accounted for about 70% of what those 3 guys pretty much all put together anyway. And I just think this is an offense that may just not feature a third wide receiver, or at least not in a productive way. They might be out in the field running the treadmill, but that's about it. So I don't think Deebo affects Terry McLaurin. I think the fact that he's due for touchdown regression this season based on his usage last season is more of the concern I would have for Terry McLaurin. Let's switch over to the 49ers side. And I want to get Chase in here. Chase, when you look at now, okay, so Brandon Aiyuk coming off an ACL. You have Ricky Pearsall, who showed some flashes late in the season. Maybe he can start to become something. Juwan Jennings showed out. He was the one who stepped up when Aiyuk got hurt and Deebo was not performing. And, of course, George Kittle, because of the touchdowns, finished as the tight end 1 overall. Christian McCaffrey may be back. With Deebo out of the picture, let's make it simple. Who's the biggest winner of the fantasy outputs for the 49er players?
I'm trying to figure who's the bigger winner between my guy Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall, I think. I mean, Aiyuk had already taken over as the alpha wideout in that when he was healthy in that offense. He was already there, and he's going to fill that slot if and when he comes back. Juwan Jennings, you mentioned, showed out. He's a guy that I've had my eye on. I've liked him. I've got him across a board in my dynasty leagues. I've been jumping on him wherever I could up until last year, and now it's a lot harder to acquire him. I like what he brings to the table. I wasn't a big Pearsall guy going into last season, but you're right. He did play well towards the end of the season. For me, if I'm looking at it, I think Jennings probably would be the big winner if I was coaching that team, but I'm not coaching them. They may like Pearsall better. I think those two win clearly, flat out. Like you said, Kittle's due for some touchdown regression next year.
I actually have Kittle as the big winner here. Kittle to me is the big winner. Look, Kittle
roll-wise possibly, yeah.
Kittle always, because this is how I looked at it. Kittle always goes off when at least either Aiyuk or Deebo, one of them's out. Now, Pearsall might emerge, and I think we saw the best of Juwan Jennings last season. I don't think he can necessarily duplicate that or is that type of player. I think he's a good player in his role of what he does. But what we see is that George Kittle consistently gets targeted in the red zone. And yes, I expect McCaffrey in the running game to be better in the red zone this season, but he will consistently get targeted in the red zone and consistently get targeted, more importantly, week to week, especially with the fact that you're dealing with Aiyuk having to work his way back from the ACL. Even if he is cleared in September, he's not going to be Brandon Aiyuk probably until November. So to me, George Kittle being able to maintain, like, hey, we're talking Brock Bowers, Trey McBride is that tight end one. Well, George Kittle gets to stay in that conversation, or at least the conversation of it. He's rounding out the top three, interview like two of the younger guys. That's what I took out of it. Adam, who's your big winner for this one?
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. I think it's Kittle, and I think to an extent, you mentioned the running game there. I think, look, it's hard to lose as McCaffrey in this situation, right? Given what this past year was, I think anything is progress. But, I mean, it definitely is a pretty strong sign that they need Christian McCaffrey. So, as long as he's there, he's certainly going to be relied upon, which I think is something that I had any doubts about. But definitely something that is more or less guaranteed at this juncture. But yeah, I think between him and Kittle, like those are the guys who I think are going to be leaned on the most.
Yeah, I tend to. Chris, is there any other winners you have here on the San Francisco side?
I think Ricky Pearsall is the winner, guys. I mean, look, they had a role for him. His problem was he didn't know where to line up all the time. He didn't know always where he should be on, what was his motion or not. But they had a play they wanted to utilize him for. They have him in mind when they were kind of moving on in their minds from Deebo moving forward. So I think Ricky Pearsall is going to be a guy that has easily be converted into that Deebo Samuel role, but also a guy that you can see be utilized in the slot as well. Runs a lot better patterns, I think, can tack the ball better in the air as well. So I think, I absolutely think Kittle is one of the winners of the game. I think Kittle is going to continue to be a stud because we know if he's allowed to run patterns, then he produces. But the other guy, I think, like I said, Ricky Pearsall is a guy that I think they have high hopes for, and the contract is pretty low. And they're going to need some of those moving forward. So I think that's the guy who's one of the big winners.
Well, speaking of, because we wanted to talk about two other trade possibility rumors have been out there a little bit. And we'll start with the Aiyuk side since we're talking about San Francisco anyway. So John Lynch came out and said that he's listening to offers for Brandon Aiyuk. Now, as somebody who follows the 49ers closely, I want to point out that John Lynch literally says this about every player every single freaking offseason. Now, I'm not saying that to poo-poo the idea that Brandon Aiyuk might actually be being talked about in trades. I'm just saying I think people are putting too much stock into the comments that John Lynch made during the combine. But let's have a little fun, shall we? So, what do we think about the possibility? Let's just focus on the possibility of Brandon Aiyuk actually being traded this season. Whoever wants to jump in.
I think it's silly, to be honest with you. This is a rehab season for Brandon Aiyuk. This is not a season in which, hey, look, next season, sure. But, this is one where, is he going to be ready to start the season? Joining a new team, he's going to have to learn a playbook when he's not healthy to, really even do anything. I think it would be silly on Brandon Ayuk's part. It would be silly, and then for the 49ers, he's your only established guy at the wide receiver position. I think Juwan Jennings is a pretty good receiver, but we have one season of him, and after a good handful, like more likely than not, based on the long history in the NFL, if a guy in his 5th season breaks out, it's probably a one-hit wonder. I'm not saying that's Juwan Jennings. I'm just saying that over the course of the NFL, that is largely how that goes. I liked Ricky Pearsall, but is he a known quantity? I don't think so. If you're the 49ers, I don't know why you would want to get rid of Brandon Aiyuk. And if you're Brandon Aiyuk, I don't know why you would want to leave when this is the offense that you actually probably feel pretty good about rehabbing in.
I think San Francisco is looking at it this way. We'll always take a first, second, third, fourth from somebody, a king's ransom, if they ever want to pay up for it. No, I mean, look, Adam, you said it best there. It doesn't make any sense from the injury standpoint, like you brought up, but also they just took a $31 million cap hit for the trade with Deebo Samuel, right? And $15 million more than they would have had to pay him this season. Brandon Aiyuk, if they trade him this year, something would have to not only be worked out with the injury issue of how healthy he is, but something's got to be worked out with the contract. He'd be a $40 million dead cap hit if he gets traded here. There's no way this happens. And I'll just open it up to either Chase or Chris. Do you have anything you want to add to those?
No, when you put it that way, there's a $40 million cap hit, even for a team like the 49ers, who I've said before, operate like the cap doesn't even exist. They always find a way to fit in whoever they want, whenever they want. It seems like they're really good at the cap gymnastics from an outsider's point of view. A $40 million cap hit is something nobody's going to take nobody's going to take that on for any return. I don't think so. Yeah. It's a silly prospect from that standpoint alone.
Well,
real quick,
I was thinking, go ahead, Chris. Yeah.
I was going to say real quick, teams have been cutting guys for $40 million contracts from quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins. Go down the list of guys dropping Russell Wilson last year. It's not something that doesn't happen. To me, Dan, I 100% agree with you. If the 49ers get thrown what they were being talked about last year, somebody was like, here's a 1 and a 3. John Lynch was like, yeah, I should have took those deals last year. I would take it now. That's what I think you're basically hearing is that, yes, I wish I would have took those deals that I was being offered. Now, if you offer me that now, I would take it in a heartbeat, to everybody's point. But a guy coming off major knee surgery, who's offering that, who's going to pay up for that? Sure, the 49ers would do it if somebody was actually going to buy on the other side.
Well, no, and you talk about the teams who have the cap room to even do it. I mean, you're talking about teams like New England Patriots and the Raiders and teams who have high first-round draft capital. They're not going to give up for Brandon Aiyuk. So, yeah, none of that's going to happen. Now, this one's a little more interesting because this picked up some steam today. We're recording this on a Wednesday. DK Metcalf, whether or not he's going to be traded. He came out today and said he's demanding a trade, or at least it was leaked today, because Seattle seemed to be upset that it got leaked. So it got leaked today that he has asked for a trade and that Seattle's open to the idea. Chris, I'm going to go to you first on this one, but I do want to throw this out there. This is what threw me. Clint Kubiak, in part, reportedly, why he was hired was because he had the best plan to utilize DK Metcalf next season. So it's a little hard for me to digest this, but I want to go to you for your reaction.
I don't think this is a Clint Kubiak thing, because I heard the same thing, Dan. I think this is a coaching staff would love to have DK Metcalf. What I think this is the Seattle Seahawks not wanting to pay DK Metcalf as much money as he wants to get paid. I think he looks what Jamar Chase is about to get. He wants to cash in big time. He's going to want to start his contract right around the numbers that you're seeing Justin Jefferson, because in his mind, he's going to be, why am I not one of these guys who's still one of the superstar receivers if you're going to feature me? And if these teams are all salivating about me, what I'm hearing about, and willing to pay me and want to feature me, why haven't you guys? Yeah, you're talking about coaching staffs now, but you're not paying me the money that everybody else is getting paid. I think this is DK looking at it like, I think the grass is greener and I want to get paid.
They all always want to get paid. That's the issue. I'm going to go Chase and Adam, you two up top on the screen here. If Metcalf were to be traded, Chase, what's your number one landing spot for him fantasy-wise? Adam, what's your number one spot for him fantasy-wise?
Fantasy-wise, I'm not necessarily saying this as a fan that I would want this, but there's been some talk about. Go ahead. Fantasy
and somewhat realistic. We'll go that.
Somewhat realistic. My Packers have been talked about. We know that they've, the big talk all offseason here has been, well, they need a number one guy. He would definitely be the number one guy in that room. He would be the, a big bodied receiver on the outside for them. I think he could help out. Jordan Love, I think he would bring something different to that room that they haven't had, and they seem to have enough space right now to do it. Rodgers is off the books, and they can move forward without having to worry about that. The question becomes price. They're not necessarily always big on, making these kinds of big off-season acquisitions like that. They generally tend to build through the draft. So they're loath to give up draft picks. So it becomes a question of price, but I think he could help out there. And I think fantasy wise, it's probably a lateral to slight bump up move for him to go from where he was and what his role was in Seattle, which declined a bit last year with the emergence of Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think it's probably a lateral move, but a good move fantasy wise. I wouldn't be dumping him in my dynasty shares of him if he went to Green Bay. That's for sure.
Adam, what do you got?
I'll throw you a curveball. The Chargers would be incredibly interesting. Him off of play action would be disgusting. Justin Herbert and him would be disgusting. The matchup between him and Ladd is like the ideal wide receiver 1 and 2 combo that you could possibly have. And Justin Herbert's pass attempts were significantly rising the second half of the season. I think that if that trend were to continue, you add in DK Metcalf, I think it could be really, really interesting, both from an NFL perspective, probably more so from an NFL perspective, but as well for fantasy. That could easily become a team that quickly becomes very similar to those Titans offenses with A.J. Brown. Where, okay, maybe the volume isn't necessarily what you would always want, but you're getting so many touchdowns that who really cares?
Yeah, okay, Chris.
Dan, I don't know how plausible it is, but what I would love to see is Atlanta. Could you imagine Michael Penix throwing to DK Metcalf and Drake London and Kyle Pitts? Come on, like that would be one of the we'd watch every Sunday. Tune in to Atlanta, watch that offense.
Throw it up, throw it up, throw it up.
Madden team right there, 99, 99, 99, huge guy. Yep. No, that would be beautiful. That would be beautiful. We're up against the clock for this segment, but I just want to give we'll dive into the fantasy impact of this throughout the offseason, but I want to give a huge shout out to the Chicago Bears. I mean,
yes,
Ben Johnson was going to do this, and they're going after it hard. 6th-round pick for Jonah Jackson, and then you come back a 4th-round pick for Joe Thuney. I mean, they're already attacking the one weakness they have on that offense. Everything that we thought Ben Johnson was going to bring this Bears team, I'm telling you, it's coming. They ain't done yet because they still have salary cap room. We'll see when they add a center, maybe even a tackle in the draft. We'll see that coming up. But big shout out to the Bears. I do want to move on here, though, to our discussion that we want to have about the combine importance. We're going to get into our combine winners and losers, but I think it's important before we do that. Let's have a little discussion about how important is the combine to your process. So, Adam, I want to start with you on this one. When you look at the combine, what's important to you? What's not important to you? And maybe it's a position-dependent thing.
It is a position-dependent thing. For example, offensive linemen, tight ends, those two specifically, safeties as well. Athleticism is a really massive predictor, especially tight ends and offensive linemen, but safeties are up there, especially when you go to the free safety type guys and guys that need to go sideline to sideline. So for those positions and for the purpose of a fantasy show, tight end, athleticism is like one of the first things that I'm looking at, candidly. At quarterback, athleticism matters, but it's really tricky, right? Athleticism matters, but I think the film, like the athleticism you're seeing, I think matters a lot more for quarterback. But candidly, because the comparison, the sample is so awful now, right? Lamar Jackson didn't run at the combine. Milroe didn't run at the combine. Like half these guys that I would want, like it would be valuable for me to know the athleticism, aren't running. So then when I do get like Anthony Richardson, who ran 2 years back, it's like, oh, he was the best, combine athlete at the quarterback position ever. But that's because the last quarterback that ran a 40 was Michael Vick. What are we doing here? I don't have any sample to compare you against. So for me, I just throw the quarterback position out the window. I don't care. I think that for NFL teams, it matters because that's where you get your interviews in. You're getting your interviews with the quarterbacks in largely at the combine, at the Senior Bowl, all of these events. So it matters, but for me as an outside observer, not being in those rooms, I don't like it. I slept through the quarterback position. It didn't matter. Wide receiver, I like to look at the overall athleticism. There are certainly instances, and we're going to talk about some specific guys, where specific drills do matter, especially when you have specific questions about a guy. I'll give an example who I don't plan on talking about otherwise, being Jalen Royals, for example. I didn't have this thought, but I heard people questioning his long speed. He runs a 4.42, that shuts that up real quick. So if you have a specific question, then I think it matters. But otherwise, just like to see generally, on average, what are you as an athlete? I'm not as much concerned about, the 40 is great. I'm concerned about the whole picture. You are this size and run this, and your agility is this, and the jump drills matter, not just in terms of actually jumping up to get the ball, but like getting off the line of scrimmage, right? Those things matter. So the whole picture, I think, matters, but the specific drills not quite as much as I think people make it out to be. And then running back. Candidly, running back, I don't think it matters all that much. It does, like, to a degree. You need to be able to move a little bit. But to be honest with you, there's so few, like, breakout runs that happen in the NFL level, and you don't really need them, to be honest with you. It's great. That's what makes an elite back. That's the difference between a Saquon and, the RB8 in the NFL, for sure. No doubt there. But, like, you can be Kyron Williams and test awful, and you're still amazing for fantasy, right? So it matters, but it's not the biggest deal in the world. I think, there's a lot of things that matter to me more than that.
Well, here's where I do want to give a little bit pushback on the quarterbacks. Now, and this first of all, I want to get this off my chest, actually, before I get into that. Jalen Milroe, why did you not run, you doofus? Like, we all know you had no momentum going into this. At least give the people something to get excited about. Jesus. Anyway, I had to get it off my chest. But more back to my point on the quarterback side of it. While yes, I'm with you that the film matters a hell of a lot more when determining these quarterbacks as a position in particular. Maybe more film matters for everybody, but I think it matters the most for quarterbacks amongst all of them. I do think it gives you the opportunity, though, to see these guys throwing the same patterns one after another, because you do get to see, okay, who has actual good spin on the ball, actual legitimate arm strength compared to the rest of the quarterback class, who seems to have a nice, drop on their ball, who has the better accuracy, throwing to receivers you don't know when you're going up, compared to those quarterbacks right there in a row like that when they're going back to back to back, because you don't get that on tape, you don't get that on the pro days. So I think it gives you kind of a more apples to apples comparison when you see them doing that. So that part, when they do the throwing drills, I do pay attention. I'm not necessarily going to like put a big weight on it or anything like that, but I am paying attention. Who's got a tighter ball? Who does have the actual arm strength compared to certain players? Where do you kind of stack up with that? So I do think there's some importance that you can get just for the comparison, because you don't get to see that anywhere else. I don't know if you want to rebuttal to that.
Yeah, no, I guess I shouldn't go all out with the hyperbole. I'm not falling asleep through it, but I'll say this. The combine genuinely, 100% does not impact my final grade on a quarterback in any capacity. Will there be things that I watch in the combine that go into my notes for a prospect? Absolutely. So, for example, if I see that someone in said throwing drills, their form is consistent, then I will go back to the tape and confirm or rebut that. But I'm going to make my final evaluation based on the tape. If I see something in the combine that makes me question something that I had thought or whatever, I do use it. It is a source of information, but it's just not a primary source that I'm using to build my actual final grades, if that makes, a little more sense.
No. That does make sense to me. Chris, when you're looking at the combine, what sticks out to you? What are you looking for with these players? How are you utilizing that tool?
For me, Dan, I want to see as much as possible. I want to see the tape. The tape is always important, of course, but I do think playing football in the rest area also matters. I want to see what do you do when you're quote unquote in an actual situation, in a sense. Do you drop back? Do you take 3-step drops? Do you kind of hitch? Do you do certain things with your mechanics when it comes to the quarterback position? I think is very intriguing to me. Whether that thing is, have you worked on something to try to improve since the offseason that maybe you show that you're coachable, that you can show improvement? So I think throwing to me is something that, I go back to a couple of years ago, we saw C.J. Stroud just throw. Everybody kind of walked around and just like, wow, yeah, dude could throw the ball. I think you can just tell certain times when there's a guy who's special when the ball's in their hands. I think likewise as athletes. Now, I don't sit there, to kind of to Adam's point, not everything I base off of my final grade is going to be, what you did, what 40 you ran, what skills you have necessarily when it comes from you showed at the combine. But what I am going to look at is, do those skills that you had the combine, do they translate onto the field? If you're a guy, can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So if you're a guy who has are supposed to stretch the field, but you run a 4.7 out there as a receiver, it's going to matter to me because I'm wondering, can you actually stretch the field if you're not playing against, certain schools, especially when you have small school teams playing against, if you're a competition where you have no idea really where they stand versus somebody else. So for me, it is something that I factor in throughout. I do agree there's positions where I kind of weigh it in more so than others. I think running back and athletic, Adam talked about tight ends, probably the most apparent to me, where I look for the stiffness. I look for how can you even in a blocker, if you weren't asked to block, can I see something against the sled that shows me that you have the ability to block? So I think a lot of those things, I am looking for pass protection, or can you catch the ball out of the backfield? How natural are you at a running back? Because those things are going to matter whether or not you get on the field early or not to me. So there's a lot of things that I do kind of look at in the combine that I don't necessarily can't get the tape, because a lot of guys aren't asked to do the same things, week in, week out that they're asked to do at the combine.
No, I think that's a very fair way to go about it. And Chase, I just want to go to you one thing, what's more important to you, I guess, film or tape? And then the second thing is, have you had a player that maybe you've hated on tape, but they had a great combine and did a 180 on them?
I don't know that the combine's ever made me do a complete 180 on somebody. I look at the combine and I use it as part of the overall equation. I mean, when we're evaluating prospects, doing what we do and doing what the NFL guys are doing we're trying to put together a mystery, right? We're trying to solve a mystery. And the mystery is this guy in front of us going to be a good pro player? Okay. And to get that answer, or to get what you think is the answer, you have to use all of the clues and all of the information available to you. And the combine results, the measurables and the drill performances, they're just a couple of pieces of the information of the total, right? You have much more information available to you, in my opinion, much more information available to you based on the tape that guy's put out. Now, yeah, if a guy was only a 1-year starter, maybe we learn a little bit more about that guy overall. But I mean, I think about things like, Orlando Brown a couple years ago ran the 5th worst 40 time overall in history. And everybody's like, oh, geez, Orlando Brown, he can't run. Well, Baker Mayfield, who had been his quarterback in college, said it best. He said, when are you going to watch Orlando Brown run 40 yards down the field? Never. Look at his tape, see how the man plays. Yeah, and 5, 6, however many Pro Bowls later, I mean, I guess probably Baker was probably right in that instance, right? One of the things I remember about Brian Bulaga, long-time right tackle for the Packers, and then finished up his career with the Chargers. When they drafted him in the first round, everybody said, oh, his arms are too short. His hands are too small. His measurement, he's too short arm to play tackle in the NFL. Dude played 11 seasons, started 122 games, won a Super Bowl in his rookie season as a starter, as a rookie, right? So, I mean, yeah, he had short arms, but the dude can play football. He played football at Iowa. He was a great tackle there, and he ended up being a very good tackle for a long time in the NFL. Tom Brady. There were 15 offensive linemen who had better verticals and better 40 times than he did at his combine. And he's a famous example of somebody who went way late in the draft. But I'm just saying, if we're going to take every measurement off of the combine results, don't let that outweigh the tape that we have and the actual performance on the football field. They call it the underwear Olympics. They don't play in underwear in the NFL. A lot of guys don't wear a whole lot of pads in their pants, but they don't play in their underwear. They don't throw without shoulder pads on. They don't, run. They don't have to make cuts without full pads on, without a helmet on. They don't have to see things happen without helmets on. It's a different job playing the game in the game than it is running drills in what amounts to a glorified practice.
Yeah, look, so yeah, 100%. Basically, what we're saying is that it's a tool. It's a tool that
Yes.
you can utilize. Adam, I'm going to add to Adam's point what he made. When a guy has a question and he nails it in the combine, well, then that's the question answered. The reverse is also true. If I thought you were a guy who's going to come in and be a speed demon, and then you run a 4.6, well, now I have to go back and look at the tape. There's certain things to look at. Certain positions matter more with metrics. Chase, you talked about the offensive lineman. Well, yeah, no, they're not going to run 40 yards down the field, but I do want to see that 10-yard split. I do want to see that 3-cone drill, how your hips going to move. How are you going to explode off the line? Those things are going to be important. And when I use the combine for me, it's about confirming or disaffirming, whatever the word is I'm looking for, unconfirming, I don't know, for what I've seen on tape leading up to that point. And do I need to go back and double check something on somebody? That's a lot what it winds up being for me, for instance. So that was our discussion to set up the combine talk. Now it's time to actually talk about some of our combine winners and losers. And we're going to start off, of course, with the quarterback position. And we have a number of guys. We'll get into deep in some of them and everything like that. But I want everybody to talk about at least mention who were their risers and fallers and why they were their risers and fallers. Chris, I want to start with you. We're going to talk about the quarterbacks here. Their stocks up and down. Who was on the rise? Who impressed you at the combine and why?
So I'm going to give you guys that actually, literally have moved on my board. So I'm kind of going against Adam where he said it doesn't affect his rankings. It did affect my rankings. Tyler Shock is one that jumps at me right off the bat. A guy who got a lot of talk about at the combine itself. A lot of teams are, supposedly interested, although he's an older prospect. The guy can throw the ball. He's 6'5". And one of the things that stood out was his arm strength. He could hit all throws, throughout the entire field. Health has been his problem. This guy broke his, collarbone. Had been in college, it seems like, for an eternity, but with a new kind of how things are set up, 7 years. But a guy who wasn't somebody who I thought even really had a shot, but hearing more and more about what I saw from my own eyes, and then hearing what I saw from the combine, I think this guy's got a chance to go in the first 2 or 3 rounds. So he's a guy who's moving up my board. Jackson Dart is a guy who didn't necessarily wowed me, but I think he showed me that he had a stronger arm than I gave him credit for. And I have to kind of, I have to give him credit for that. And one of the other reason he moved up for myself is some other guys just didn't stand out, Dan. I think a lot of quarterbacks in general, this class is kind of, uninteresting in a lot of ways. So the last guy I'll give you guys is Cook from Missouri, a guy who I had no idea was that athletic, ran under a 4.6. Had great 10-yard split. You talked about the 10-yard split, so that shows you can scramble in a sense. We see a lot of offenses kind of, especially in fantasy, love the running quarterback. Cook was a guy who was not even on my board at all, but he has to be a guy that I can actually have on there looking into other prospects.
Yeah, I actually comped, because Cook was also one of the guys who was a riser for me too. I comped him actually to Will Levis, where he showed, hey, I got a bigger arm than most in this class. I'm more mobile than most people thought I was in this class. But what the problem is, and why he wasn't on my radar to begin with, he's not very accurate. He crumbles under pressure. He doesn't have great pocket awareness. So, I mean, again, the combine made him rise up where I actually paid attention to him. But he's not necessarily somebody who I'm going to be like, oh, yeah, this is going to be the sleeper prospect. But there's attributes there that if he does get to sit and develop, maybe this guy actually winds up being somebody. The only guy I really want to add on to what you had was Kyle McCord. This is somebody who actually I hated Kyle McCord. In Ohio State, like the guy had all the talent in the world and looked absolutely atrocious the entire junior year. But he goes to Syracuse, and I was actually impressed. His fundamentals developed in a big way. Like I felt like I wasn't even watching the same quarterback on his footwork and his passing, and as a result, he actually looks like he can make every pass in the NFL and actually put some zip on it. And right now, unfortunately, because of how weak this quarterback class is, that might be enough to get you as a top 3, top 4 quarterback in this class, just having legitimate arm talent on an NFL level. So McCord, I still think he's more of a developmental project, but when I look at him, I see a lot of similar traits to Derek Carr. And when I said it to Adam earlier about seeing the quarterbacks go back to back to back to back and being able to kind of compare how the ball was coming out, well, of the guys who would be, in that quarterback 3 discussion, Jackson Dart, maybe Jalen Milroe, if you wanted to throw him in there, I think McCord's arm and accuracy and mechanics looked just as good as, let's say, a Jackson Dart. And the way it was flying out. So I think he made a really big, the production he had in Syracuse and the performance he had at comparing himself to the other guys at the combine. I think he actually did take a big jump where maybe this is a early day 3 pick, maybe late day 2 in that 3rd round, and somebody we could maybe keep our eye on if he were to develop a little bit more. But I think he's going to be a backup quarterback that coaches are absolutely going to love, which is going to give him a shot. Just to finish up the dart point, because I've been a big, I can't stand Dart. I can't stand the hype that he's getting. And by the way, I'm going to say this right now. I'm still not on if he goes in the 1st round, he's my number 1 bust. I will come out the next day and say, you want to see your bust? That's the bust if he's going to go in the 1st round. But do I have to, in a dynasty perspective, rank him as my QB3? Probably, because he showed that he at least belongs in the conversation as the 3rd quarterback, and everything's pointing towards he's going to get the draft capital. So he does wind up being my QB3 in my dynasty rankings, even if I'm not that excited about him. I comp them to Daniel Jones. Let's get to Adam here. Who is you didn't care about it for fantasy purposes or anything in your discussion, actually. So, do you have a riser from the combine or no?
Not quite a riser, but I do want to echo what Chris said with Tyler's show. He was someone who I had going into the combine, pre-combine. He was my QB4, and I think that the combine allowed me to confirm a lot of what I had seen. Because I saw on tape that he was fairly athletic, and I didn't think that was getting a lot of conversation. He tested, pretty well athletically. And I thought the arm was something that actually gave him a really solid ceiling between that and the size. And you definitely saw the arm. So that's an example of where it didn't change my grade. I have not changed a single sentence, a character on my sheet for him.
Will not change it.
No, it's not any different. However, it allowed me to confirm what I had seen before. And, if his arm looked like a noodle out there, then I probably would have needed to go back to the tape and readjust. But it was a good, data point to, be like, well, this is the ACC, so I need to, it would be nice to know that I'm not crazy. He is fast, so he can throw the ball pretty damn hard. It was a nice data point to have, for sure.
Chase, did you have any winners in this combine for the quarterbacks?
I mean, I hate to beat a dead horse, but I don't think these horses are dead yet. Shuck and Cook, I think, we're big risers for me, just based on the fact that I'm always looking at this from the standpoint of fantasy. I mean, we're a fantasy show. That's what we do. I'm not looking at this like if I was a great NFL talent evaluator, I wouldn't have been at Disneyland with my kids this weekend. I'd have been in Indianapolis, right? Doing what they're doing. But Shuck, a guy that, hey, he looks like a dang quarterback. He's got all the measurables, 6'5" and everything. And again, he reiterated this weekend, I am a quarterback. I can throw the ball. And he's somebody that, from a fantasy perspective, especially now, we've got to watch where he goes in the draft. But from a fantasy perspective, I'm like, you know what? All my dynasty teams are super flex. So I'm like, I'd be willing to maybe spend a 4th or 5th round pick on this guy and take him and bet on the idea that he could become something later on. And the same thing with Cook from Missouri. Then the athleticism that he showed, if he does get an opportunity somewhere, if I can throw out a 4th or 5th round pick and get that, and he ends up being, something later on, I'm psyched up about that based on what he showed in on this weekend in his testing there. Obviously it didn't change my opinion that Jalen Milroe is probably a better prospect than the two of them or anything like that. But from a fantasy perspective, I'm like, I could see myself now taking a shot in a draft, taking a late flyer on Shuck or Cook.
Yeah. Let's go to our down guys. So, and I'm going to throw this out there. Milroe was the down guy. Again, in the comparison, we were throwing it. Sure, he could throw it a freaking mile, but it was clear that all the questions we had about him, can you be accurate? Can you put touch on your passes? No. Everything was pretty much off-centered all the way across the board. And again, I think he, even though, and Chris, I don't know what you think about this. I harped on it earlier, but even though we know he's the most athletic quarterback of this class, do you not think he hurt himself a little bit by not running and putting that on display so people could get excited about something?
I'm torn on this, Dan. Where I kind of tend to think is that the legend of whatever my 40 is more appealing to some teams than if I actually run the 40. Well, I think let's just say that if a guy goes out there and runs a 4.65, then all of a sudden we're going to be like, well, now we have another knock on this question about Jalen Milroe. You're not really an athlete either. I think, Dan, you keep that tantalizing option for them that no matter what, people still think you run a 4.4, that you're fast, you're big, you're strong. So that still gets you, discussion as an option for the quarterback class.
What other down guys did you have for this class?
Down for me was going to have to be Will Howard. This isn't a guy I was excited about. This isn't a guy that I was high on, but it's a guy that had, been playing well, had that nice playoff stretch. A guy at 6'5", looks the part, has some mobility. You wonder, could he wind up, on the Raiders, or have some situations where he could wind up actually contending for a starting position. So I went out and I watched Will Howard throw against air, and I realized this is why I don't like Will Howard. Kind of to Adam's point of whether it's on the tape or in person, I see that he can't drive the ball to the outside. I see that he kind of looks out of shape to me. I don't see this guy is going to be a physical, attribute. Physicality is going to be an attribute for him per se, where he's going to be scrambling around making yards with his legs.
And hard, Will Howard.
just saying, look kind of not chiseled to me, buddy. And then I saw a guy who Dan, I think that, with a guy who's been in college as long as he has, his mechanics should look way better than they have. And I think that was just something that really stood out to me. We talked about throwing against air, but throwing against air, your drop still struggled. You weren't able to drive the ball to the outside. You couldn't open up your hips. I just think there's some struggle things where I think Will Howard could have been a guy that I thought maybe had a chance to be something, maybe a poor man's Bo Nix for a year, 1 or 2, but I think that definitely can't happen.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I also had, because I'll just jump in here, because I also had Howard as one of my down guys here a little bit, and I can't get it on the screen for some reason. Chase is taking up my spot, but
you're welcome.
He was only on my list for the simple fact that he was supposed to be big, right? He was supposed to be big and he could run around, and so maybe he had some fantasy upside. And then Chris, to your point, like everything we had a question about is exactly what he showed, that he's definitely a concern and is just not going to be great for him. So he kind of fell off my board. You could throw Riley Leonard for me in that same conversation. Like he kind of showed every weakness that we thought he had on film, definitely displayed out there during the combine as well. So nobody I'm concerned about for NFL or fantasy wise. I just want to put a pin in Milroe after this. Fantasy wise, I'm still going to have him ranked as my QB4 because I still think at the end of the day, with his athleticism, somebody's going to probably take him, I think, in day 2, a late day 2 pick. I don't think he's going to wait all the way to day 3 to get drafted. So when you factor in the fact that we know he's mobile, Chris was talking about, you could have a 4.6 40. Yes, it's a factor. It's a concern if you were to actually do that. But I think we all agree, just watching film, this guy probably runs faster than a 4.6 40, and he is athletic, and he would be a dual threat quarterback. So from that standpoint, because this quarterback class is the way it is, that we just have to take somebody who might have some sort of fantasy upside somehow, some way. Adam, what was your downer guys?
No, I think
do you have anybody else?
No, I think it just confirmed a lot of the guys that you talked about. Like,
it didn't affect his grade, Dan, at all, though.
No, genuinely, like it didn't. Like that.
You're out.
Will Howard was my QB 10 in the bad class, and he's still my QB 10 in the bad class. Like, what am I going to change?
Ouch.
That's fair. Chase, do you have any other down guys that we didn't mention?
I wasn't necessarily high on him to begin with, but Dylan Gabriel didn't do a whole hell of a lot for himself, I didn't think, this weekend. He didn't show a whole lot arm strength-wise. His accuracy wasn't all that great either, especially for throwing around in underwear. Howard was a dip. And then I'm just going to mention my boy, or my anti-boy, Quinn Ewers there. He probably helped himself this weekend, but he didn't help himself in my eyes. I'm still not buying on that. Somebody's going to bite on that in the draft. And if somebody bites on that in the draft with hopes of him being their starter year 1, then that would be my bust for this season, because you all know my take on that. FQE, forget Quinn Ewers. I'm sure he's a wonderful human being and his mother loves him, but No, not for me.
Real quick, don't be surprised if Jalen Milroe winds up being on the Rams.
That would be interesting. Talk about a change in philosophy. That'd be one way to go.
Right.
Les Snead's been talking a lot about wanting a mobile quarterback. Had a lot to say this offseason so far.
Yeah, because they got hurt beat by Jalen Hurts. Now they want somebody who can run too. Let's get into the running backs a little bit, the winners and losers here. This is where it gets really interesting, especially with the class that we have. It's absolutely insane. Adam, I'm gonna go with you with this one since you were like poo-pooing that this combine has anything to do with quarterbacks.
It does, Dan. It just doesn't change anything that he's graded.
It doesn't change, darn it. It doesn't change. But no, Adam, seriously. So when you looked at this draft class, this combine, who are the biggest standouts to you as far as the running back class goes?
Yeah, for me, it's Damian Martinez and Devin Neal. Damian Martinez is someone who we've talked about as a guy who I think he's a fantastic runner. It's just, I don't think that there's a whole lot that he can do on the receiving end. So for that to be the case, I need to be really confident in what you are as a runner. And look, it wasn't a great showing in any particular drill, but just by being above average in pretty much everything, right? A 4.51 is 80th percentile in 40 times for the running back position over the last 30 years. His vertical was solid. It was 70th percentile and for the position. Broad jump was actually great. It was 90th percentile for the position. So these were enough things that were going his way, especially that broad jump. He's getting, started really quick. And for bigger backs, I think that's almost more important than anything else. On the whole, it just made me feel really confident that he had his running style can translate to the next level. So I feel really good about him. And then Devin Neal was similar. It wasn't that any one drill was great. The 4.58 for some might be actually a turnoff. I could see that. But for me, I'm really excited about the vertical, the broad jump, and the size actually came in pretty solid. He's someone that I was worried if you get into the low 200s can be a little concerning, but at 213 and to still have some really good burst off the line out of the backfield is really exciting to me. So these are guys who, again, in the 40 and the flashy stuff, maybe not that great, but their overall athleticism bars out pretty well. They both have really solid relative athletic scores, for example. So I'm really excited for both of them.
Well, and I'll put this out there too. Devin Neal could be a little bit of a riser in the fact that he's actually on my radar because I thought I was writing him off as Audric Estimate, but you love Audric Estimate, so I expected you to like Devin Neal, especially they did a little bit better than that. I digress. Chris, who is your big winners for this running back class? This staff running back class.
Well, these are two guys that I was not necessarily as high as most of the consensus has been going into the this combine. But Cam Skattebo is a guy who didn't test everything, didn't run the 40, which a lot of people are questioning still, but shows you the athleticism, shows you the vertical, shows you explosiveness that you wanted to see, and this looked like a guy that belonged out there. To me, a guy that I think he's definitely going to kind of solidify his opportunity to be one of the higher running backs drafted in this draft class. And then the other guy that I like a lot was Quentin Jenkins. Jenkins was a guy that I had questions about. Can you be a guy who's a home run threat in the NFL? I saw you get the physical yards. I think you're a bigger back. Adam talked about Martinez, some of the other guys. There's a lot of big backs, guys. I think in this draft, especially the early 1 or 2 down guys. So I was thinking this guy is the guy I kind of questions for. He has to fall in the right role, but I think he has enough athleticism to be out there, be a guy who can get you some big plays as well. So Jenkins isn't a guy necessarily, still is not as high as everybody else is, but definitely moved up my board with his combine performance.
Well, I know you're not as high as I am on him because he's my number 3 running back now in this class, because the only question I had about Jenkins is what was your long speed going to be? I love the power, the physicality. I think he'd be a better receiver than people give him credit for. He can do all 3 downs, and he's not a bad, he needs to work on his technique, but he's a willing blocker, and he has the physicality to be able to do it on top of it. I was already going back and forth with people where I said Jenkins is better than Travion Henderson. I think the fact that he ran the 4.48 just gave me even more confidence on that. So I agree with that. Also, I'm going to throw this in there because I agree with you too. Cam Skattebo, definitely a big winner for me. Even though he didn't run the 40, and hopefully he'll do that for the pro day because he was dealing with, some sort of hamstring soreness. Is why I didn't run the 40. He was elite in his vertical and broad jumps, which measures your explosion coming on the line. And that's the big thing we came scat about. How good of an athlete are you? Truly, I think that proves no, this guy's going to be legit exploding through the line of scrimmage. He's legit slippery, legit going to be getting missed tackles like he did in college. He projects out to be that way. And I think it was as big that he came in, at 219? Yeah, 5'9", 219. There were rumors about Scatabo being 5'7" out there coming into the combine. So he puts that to bed. 5'9", 219. Yeah, it was like little Chase out there running around, basically what they were trying to say Cam Scatabo.
Hey, I'd be looking up at 5'7". So
So at that size with those explosive jumps, and we'll get to see what his pro day gets to be, I think it confirms for me what I thought about Cam Scatabo, and that he is my RB4 actually as of this moment for that. So what I will say this, one guy I want to mention where he didn't move up in my board, but he definitely confirmed that he deserves to be the RB2 overall was Omarion Hampton. And I know this is about risers and fallers, and maybe Hampton wasn't the big riser because he didn't have as far to go because most people talked about him as RB2, RB3, but it was impressive enough where, can I say he rose my comps, where I had him comped initially to Josh Jacobs, and now because of his combine athletic profile that he put out there along with the tape, I now feel like I can comp him to more of a Jonathan Taylor. I mean, Josh Jacobs is a great fantasy running back, right? We're talking about a top 12 guy, but Jonathan Taylor is somebody who can be an RB1 overall. And now I'm looking at Omarion Hampton in that lens with what he was able to put out there along with the grade A tape that I had. So Hampton was a riser for me in that standpoint of just how I view his overall upside. And
Dan,
I think a lot of us are going to have. And go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say to that point real quick, there's also a lot of talk about that he could be the first running back off the board this draft. A lot of guys have him as the top running back on their boards.
Well, he helped himself.
I think it's fine.
I had Hampton as one of my risers too. And again, rising for me in terms of fantasy and where I'm willing to take a guy, he was already possibly the best power back in this whole draft here, power back. But then he came out and he ran a 4.46 and he showed that, hey, maybe I'm not just thunder, I'm a little bit of lightning too. And he came out and he ran in the drills and he showed people what he can do, and he got measurables, and he came out and performed. And I think that, some of these guys, sometimes when these top guys skip the combine, okay, yeah, they're the top guys for a reason, and we know, but sometimes these guys who aren't necessarily the first overall or whatever, and Omarion Hampton, yeah, he was going to be one of the top running backs in this class anyway, but he came out and he did the drills and he performed well, and he might have helped his stock elsewhere where, they don't have that comp for Ashton Jonty right now because he didn't participate in the drills. So I liked what Hampton put on tape. I liked what he did there this weekend. So yeah, I had him as one of my risers too, because he participated.
I think you can certainly put him in the conversation. I still think it's a little crazy to take Ashton Genty out just because he didn't test, and I still think he's the best running back in this class. But I think the conversation between him and Hampton is good. And the other riser I have is Tuten, but I don't want to steal Adam's thunder because I know that's somebody Adam also had as a riser, along with whoever else was your riser for this one.
I had Martinez and Neal. We went through me for running back already.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I had Tuten though.
Okay, maybe that's what I had mixed up in my mind. Go ahead, Chase. You had Tuten.
No, listen, he showed he's a speed back. He had the fastest 40. He had the fastest 10-yard split, so which means he's getting off the line quickly. He can hit that hole quick. He had the best vertical. He had the second best broad jump. He's an explosive talent, and I think he really helped himself this weekend, and he helped himself in my eyes this weekend as well. I agree. Judkins, kind of like Hampton, another guy who we thought was maybe just thunder, showed he had a little bit of lightning too, running that 4.48. He had the second fastest 10-yard split, showed that he can be explosive. He had the best broad jump. He caught the ball well. I agree with what you said earlier. He caught the ball well. He showed that he's not necessarily just going to be a first and second down back. He should be able to run the ball on all three downs. He should be able to stay in there. So I thought he rose as well. And yeah, I liked what Hampton, Judkins, and Tuten did this weekend.
Tuten's going to be a star.
Woo!
Mark my words. That's why I didn't move my board, because he's already high on my board.
Well, he moved up big in my board. I didn't have him as high as you do on your board. But when you're talking about what Tuten did, okay, you're talking about a player where it's not just about the fact that he ran the 4.32 40 or 1.49 10-yard split or jumped out of the building with a 40 vertical and a 10-10 broad jump. It's the fact that you're talking about a player who is going to be likely, as far as mock drafts are concerned, going day 3. And now I'm looking at him like, you have a player profiler type of a Jamal Charles or a CJ Spiller.
Right.
Like, that's your athletic profile now on top of it. Jahmyr Gibbs, right? Like, you're right there athletically from that standpoint. Now, he is not a good pass protector. And so I think that's going to hinder him a little.
That's going to hurt
a lot, quite a bit, honestly, when it comes to, can you become a dual threat running back? I think that'll take time. But are you an explosive? That's why I compliment ultimately the CJ Spiller, because it took CJ Spiller time before he became a dual threat, because he had to work on his pass blocking, but was such a threat as a runner, home run hitter, that he still got early opportunities to start. Now, he was also a first-round draft pick. I don't think Tuten's going to work his way into the first round, but is he day 2 now? Yeah, I think he's day 2 now. So that was a big one for me as well. Unfortunately, there's a downside to this. You know, when we're talking about risers and fallers, there's always guys who didn't quite live up to expectations. So Adam, I want to kick this to you first. Who was a faller based on some of the things you saw at this combine?
Yeah, one of the unfortunate ones, I just he needs to be here for me, because I think is actually the person on my list who fell the furthest in terms of where he was on my rankings and where he is today, and that's Kaleb Johnson. I'm not that concerned about his 40. It's less of his 40, and it's more a matter of a lot of these other big backs help themselves, and you kind of hurt yourself. It wasn't bad. I still have a day 2 grade on Kaleb Johnson. There's nothing crazy here. But when you were a guy who I was toying between you and Travion Henderson from an RB3, then you run a 4.57, and then Martinez does really well at the combine, and Neal does really well at the combine, and Scatabo in the little bit that we saw did really well, and Harvey did really well, and it's just like all these guys who I had in a similar tier to you are kind of leapfrogging you, dude. So I'm still really excited about his pro day. Again, I have these guys kind of in a tier. It's pretty much, for me, it's Genty, it's Hampton, and then I have like 7 dudes who are like real neck and neck, and all day 2 grades is a great class in that respect for me. So he's someone that I'm waiting for the pro day. I'm excited for it. I'm hoping that he can show me some other things, run some agility, run some jumps, or do some jumps rather, and maybe help himself. But for right now, he is literally my biggest faller. Now, the guy who was the biggest disappointment for me is Kyle Monangai. It's kind of an accelerated version of what we just talked about. All the other big backs helped themselves. Taj Brooks helped himself big times. Jarquez Hunter helped himself big time. And these are the guys who I had in a similar tier with him, right? Look, they helped themselves, and you really hurt yourself, right? Because it's one thing for Kaleb Johnson. He had a 40 that wasn't great, but again, we talked about it before the show. I had Kaleb Johnson as like a 4.5 to 4.55 guy, so 4.57 sucks, but it's not like the end of the world. Monangai really needed to do something to help himself, especially in comparison to some of these other guys. And the 4.6 is kind of inexcusable when you're really only coming in at like, what is it, 213, 14 pounds?
5'8".
Yeah, I mean, you're still built really compact. I still like your vision and your physicality, but at least, like, if you gave me something on the jumps, I'd forgive the 4.6, but given your broad and your vert aren't good either, it really makes it hard for me to keep working with you. When, again, guys like Taj Brooks and Jarquez Hunter are guys who I think are similar, and in Taj Brooks' case, I think he actually can play third downs when I don't think that you can. So just guys in your tier are passing you, and there's nothing, that he actually hurt himself, I think.
Yeah, I brought us all in on this one because I think we all have Monangai as a player who definitely went down. The 4.6 in a fast class definitely makes it look even worse. They're like, this was last year, a 4.6, and we're like, all right, well, you're still in the there. This isn't that draft class. That's not how this draft class is. This draft class is fast, and this draft class is very, very good. So I'll bring in Chris and Chase. The one player I still could comp him to was Devin Singletary. Now, that's not going to blow your socks off for fantasy-wise, but
he's been usable. Yeah.
Who had fantasy outputs, because he was a compact runner with good vision and can break enough tackles, was able to weasel his way in there for fantasy relevancy here and there. So do we still think that he could be that type of player, or is he just now like, I mean, we could make the argument to Adam's point, how many guys might have jumped him that were in that same tier? Is he even being drafted now at this point? I mean,
that was part of my thought on him. I'm worried that he, tested himself out of the draft. He'll still go somewhere. He's gonna be a relevant name when we get to our rookie drafts coming up here. But I mean, dude, like I said, when you're 5'8", take it from a guy who's even shorter. But when you're short, you probably needed to show out this weekend, and he showed out in the exact wrong direction in just about every way. He was near the bottom of the rankings at the running back position in almost every drill. And for that matter, then in a deep class at your position, you needed to separate yourself. He separated himself in the wrong direction. I'm a little less likely to probably throw that flyer on him, but time will tell.
Anything to add, Chris?
No, I totally agree. I think basically he showed you that the upside that when we hoped for isn't there. The things that you're looking for on tape, he wasn't a good pass protector. He was very good struggle catching the ball as it was. You're looking for a home run threat. You're looking for a guy that could be that, a rotational guy that could be maybe stealing that second running back touches. And I just don't see a guy who's going to make even, probably maybe a special teamer maybe, but this isn't a guy I think is going to be on high people's boards. Devin Singletary's not a bad comp, Dan, but Singletary went in the 4th round. I think Muganga is going to go way lower than that.
Well, to that point there of Singletary going in the 4th round, he went in the 4th round of a very weak running back class. I think, like I said, I think this would have been a different story had it not been this draft class non-guy was trying to come out into from that standpoint. I just wanted to throw out the Kaleb thing here. Kind of to Adam's point a little bit where he's not taking him out of the 2nd round or anything like that, but he was a faller. He was a faller on my board from the part of, I think a lot of people had you as number 2 running back. Now, I was never that high on him. I always had him at number 4. I don't, I'll throw Chris up here because we'll talk about that. I always had him at number 4. Now I did move him down. I have him down at 6. I have Genty, Hampton, Judkins, Scatabo, and Henderson, who I'd rather have the explosive profile of Henderson. And then Caleb Johnson comes in for me at number 6 now as a result to that. Still somebody I really like. Still somebody I think it has upside. Still somebody who's going to get drafted day 2 and therefore have the capital where he should be going in at least the 2nd round of your rookie dynasty drafts, I believe. But he also confirmed what I had already thought, which is why I wasn't as high on in the first place, that he doesn't have a 2nd gear. When he gets into that 3rd level, his gear in the 2nd level is the same it is in the 3rd level. And when he played against tougher competition, you saw him consistently get hawked down. Now, he's just not going to be that type of runner. But I do think with his profile, Chris, and this is the other thing I kind of worried about him to some degree, I think there's a chance he gets pigeonholed depending upon what team he winds up with, even though I do think he has decent hands coming out of the backfield. But could it be a Najee Harris version? I think we could be looking at something similar.
Look, I can't disagree with you because we know how the league is. No, look, I can't disagree with that, Dan. We know how the league is now. Guys love to pigeonhole guys. But to me, he reminds me of Nick Chubb, who ran a 4.52, a guy who, wasn't necessarily utilized in the passing game, but still is very effective in fantasy football when he was healthy. Also, guys that kind of ran similar 40s. Aaron Jones ran a 4.56. Mark Ingram ran a 4.61. So he's a guy who's a bigger back, a guy with good feet. What I'm worried about, Dan, is I love the shiny toys too. I love the fast running backs. Talked about that. But I also love guys who have good vision and know how to play running back. Chase talked about that before about football players. To me, when you have good vision and you know how to play running back, I don't care as long as you don't have a ridiculously low 40. A 4.57 wasn't something necessarily to write home about. I definitely understand people had Hampton higher or certain guys they feel more reaffirmed in what they liked. But for me, Caleb Johnson was what he was going in and still is what he is coming out.
No, it's fair enough. The player I actually comped to is Brian Robinson, which basically you're RB2 for fantasy football purposes, but maybe don't have that RB1 type of ceiling. Let's get to Chase though. Chase, who are your big fallers here for this class?
We've hit on them. Caleb and Kyle here. I mean, Johnson. one of the more disappointing things about Johnson for me too was, I mean, he had the worst 10-yard split of anybody too. So it's not, I mean, if you're not going to be long speed, but you can be quick, great. Then we can maybe make that trade-off. But when you said Najee Harris guy, you read my mind, dude. I was like, oh, here, is this going to be one of those kind of situations where, honestly, from a fantasy standpoint, if he falls in the right position, if he goes to the right team, not unusable for fantasy purposes, but just not necessarily the star back that we all would love to be getting when we draft our guys.
Sure, absolutely. Chris, did I get to your I'm sorry, I forget. Did I get to your down guys?
I'm on, guys. Okay, I'm with everybody else. We get to date everybody up there. I'm with you guys.
I'm just going to throw one more name out there real quick because this guy disappointed me. Ollie Gordon, somebody who was getting a lot of hype coming into this thing, runs a 4.61 40. He has more of a player profiler type now to Gus Edwards. And Gus Edwards was very lucky that he was ever even fantasy relevant to begin with if he didn't fall in Baltimore. So I just wanted to throw that guy out there. So with that, let's move on to the wide receivers where we can get all kinds of names in here because it's a weaker class than what we're used to the wide receivers being as of late, but I still think there's a lot of interesting values. And that was kind of my take. There's a lot of mid-round tier prospects that I think did establish themselves as being values. Chris, what did you see as far as this wide receiver class goes?
So I'm going to throw you a couple different names. One of the guys who just jumped onto my board who I definitely didn't have on, it was Isaac Tesla. The guy who was, the combine star in a sense, had his own cheering section over there. But a guy at 6'4", 214, ran a 4.43, had a ridiculous, I think it was a 39-inch vertical. He's tested out of the charts, and the guy who had, wasn't uber productive in Arkansas, but a guy who had big time yardage, average over 19 yards per catch, effective in the red zone. And I just loved what I saw with him running around out there, kind of bringing the tape to life, where he's able to track the ball. He's got incredibly strong hands, and a guy who's just got an ability that may be a get on the field, a willing blocker. And you see a lot of these teams. We talked about Juwan Jennings earlier, a guy who could be a Juwan Jennings type receiver for a lot of these different teams, but also a way more higher skill athlete.
Yeah.
Another guy. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The other guy I like a lot is Thornton. Thornton is the guy from Tennessee. Deontay Thornton is 6'5", ran a 4.3. Look, he averaged 25 yards per reception this past season, had 6 touchdowns. Everybody kind of credits it. Oh, it's Tennessee system. When you're 6'5", run 4.3s, and you have a pretty good hip stand, that's what I'm impressed by. He's not one of those guys who's just fast. He can get in and out of his breaks pretty good. He has a very limited route tree right now, but a guy that we saw last year coming out of LSU who ran 3 routes had one of the better years as rookie. Sometimes when you have that skill set, you can do things when you can get down the field. So the guy I think Thornton was a guy who was already on my radar, but I think just basically jumped on everybody else's radar. And like I said, 6'5".
I can do all that too, but he got all the height in the family. So I'm just.
I just want to jump in there real quick, Chris, because we heard a similar thing with Cedric Tillman, right? You're a Tennessee wide receiver. What can you really do? But I think what you saw, which is this isn't a typical Tennessee receiver. He is bigger, more physical, had decent hips. Thornton's even bigger than that and even faster than that. So I'm kind of with you. This could be a guy who really develops and catches your eye later on. And because he ran that 40, he's going to get higher draft capital. So I just wanted to jump in there with you on that one to kind of back you up as far as the riser goes. Who's your last one?
And Torrey Horton, a guy that I think was able to show everybody what he was pre-injury, had back-to-back years where he had 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns going into last year. A guy that I think ran a 4.41, kind of solidified as one of those X receivers. Not a lot of X's, true X's, I think, in this draft. He's a guy I think you can play inside, outside. It reminds me a lot of Terry McLaurin personally, but Horton's a guy that I think is, showed me that he's healthy, and is a guy that I kind of already had on my board, but moved up my board after the performance at the combine.
Yeah, Horton definitely caught. I think Horton confirmed a lot of things that were on tape. But Adam, we go to you. Who else do you have to add to this riser list on the wide receiver side?
Yeah, first of all, I got to say I agree with you on a lot of those guys, especially Horton. I just wanted to, wide receiver, running back, I felt like there were a couple conversations to have, especially on the down guys. Wide receiver, I think there's a ton of things to talk about. So I didn't want to double up there, but I do like him a lot, and he's moving up my board. I wanted to say Jack Besh. He's someone who, look, he's built thick at the receiver position, so I was curious how that was going to work out in terms of his lateral agility. I thought he was a good receiver. I was just curious, how well he moved. I thought it was pretty well, but it's another one where on tape, especially like candidly when you get some of these lower quality videos, can always perfectly gauge how fast their feet are chopping. So he's one that I thought I was gonna really like, but I wasn't all the way in, and now I'm all the way in. So I really liked him. But then the big one for me, the big one, boys, I'm gonna have a first round grade on Jayden Higgins. I love Jayden Higgins. I genuinely I think I still have Tet as my wide receiver 1. After that, I think Jayden Higgins is in the conversation immediately. I would probably first onto my big board. Travis Hunter is higher, but that's because he is my CB1. I'm not sure which one I necessarily have graded higher as a wide receiver, if I'm being completely honest with you. I think Higgins has amongst the best hands in the class. I thought he moved on tape very well. For a guy his size, I thought he had some wiggle. I thought he could do some things after the catch. I thought his best of reminded me of Drake London in a lot of ways, in that he is just such a dominant West Coast style wide receiver. Not necessarily that he is Drake London. I think Drake London was a lot better as a prospect. Let me be very clear there. But that the things he is the best at reminds me of things that I thought about Drake London. But for him to also have the speed and then the get up, right, to be awesome on the jumps like that at his size, to me just kind of solidifies that you just move different for a dude at your size, and there's just not a ton of guys who can do that. Because even the 40 at the 4.47 I know that's not a number that like jumps out to people, but at the wide receiver position, that's like 82nd percentile. Like that's pretty solid. It's one where candidly, the split, the 10-yard split's not great, but what that means is when your 40 still ends up good, is that your long speed's crazy. That when you get into gear, you're going, right? So I know you can jump, I know you can move after the catch, and I know that once you're down the field, you're just going to keep picking up speed, and you're a guy that high points the ball like no other, has some of the best hands of the class. I love him. This was a great way to finish up the process for him.
I have McConkey at him. That's why I would go my comp with him right now.
Bigger though, you can be physical and do X things, while also being a great route runner and someone who can move after the catch.
Yeah, I brought us all in on this conversation because I think all of us, you'd be crazy not to have Higgins as a riser at the wide receiver position. I mean, flat out, plain and simple. I liked his route running. I liked his high pointing of the ball. I liked what he did with the box out in the red zone. He shows all those abilities there. But what I question, and I told Chris this off screen, I thought this was a guy who's going to come in and run a 4.6, because I did not see anything that indicated to me that he could stretch the field effectively or run or separate from guys at the top of routes on that third level. When he came out and ran a 4.47, now I think his 4.52 on his second run is a little more accurate to what I think he really will be more times than not. But even the 4.52 would be great. But his official time being a 4.47. Okay, well, now you're big, legit big, because he measured it at 6'4", 214, and you can run, and I already know you're a good route runner. I mean, I have this comp at Adam Thielen. I'm having trouble moving off of that because the tape, man, he screams Adam Thielen to me, but let's just say he might be a faster version of Adam Thielen. So, Chris, I know you love them, so I wanted to bring in this conversation too.
No, I do, and I think I'm glad that Adam's excited as well. I think about this guy. Look, what I like about him, Adam, he talked about the long speed he kind of gains up, but a guy that was able to get open in the phone booth off the line quickly is able to be able to push up the field with that speed you guys talked about, but able to break down and get open. That's going to be pivotal. He's going to get separation galore in the NFL, which is what makes King getting targets. That's how it kind of trickles down to you. That's why Lukaku was so good last year. And I think a lot of people were surprised that Ladd ran last year in his 40. I think similar to Higgins, he's got that ability to kind of stretch the field and attack the ball. Those things play out well in the NFL.
You combine great long speed with a great release package, that's dangerous to me. And that's why where I'm like, I'm not worried about the 10-yard split not being the best, because your release package is awesome. You out physical corners of the line of scrimmage, so I don't care.
So you have a wide receiver too. I still can't put him over Trey Harris.
I have Trey Harris in the same tier. He is very, very close. My top four guys are all very, very close.
But I will say Higgins moved up my board where I am talking about him as, okay, are you the third best receiver potentially? Because I'm not as big on Luther Burden as a lot of people are.
I am not either.
I do think he helped himself a little bit by running a 4.41. That did kind of surprise me, but I'm still not as big on Luther Burden as most are. And I'm not as big, even with the speed demon of Matthew Golden, I still think he would be a bust first-round pick. He does not have enough of a package, in my opinion, to be a first-round pick wide receiver. So the more I talk about this, you know what? I think Higgins might be my wide receiver 3. So I'll be one spot behind you, Adam, on that. Chase, did you have anything on Higgins that stuck out to you that you dropped your jaw? Since we're
Dude, 6'4", 215 and ran fast. Yeah. No, I mean, 6'4" is a whole other world to me. But no, I agree with everything that's been said here. I think he helped himself. I think his teammate Jaylen Noel helped himself too. I think he played very well and showed out very well. I think this weekend as well. I think Golden looked like a boss in that 40, so I think he helped himself. I don't necessarily know that. He jumped up a ton in my estimation. He was going to be where he was going to be anyway. But running 4.29, especially when his teammate Isaiah Bond kind of laid an egg in that same event there. But yeah, Higgins looked like a stud.
It's like the scouts were scouting the wrong player the whole season, guys.
Can we just take a brief aside to talk about Isaiah Bond saying that he was going to break the combine record and then running a 4.4? That's awesome.
Yeah. One better for you, Adam. Who did he pay off to say that his official time was a 4.39? Because I call BS. I'm sorry. I was watching that there.
He didn't even look as fast as he was, quote unquote.
He did not get to the 4.39. Who did you pay off to be like, all right, well, we'll give you the 4.39. The only thing I'll give Bonds, we're not totally trash, and was like, okay, yes, you did get to 24 miles an hour, which was the fastest of any.
Yes, he achieved the fastest time. Yeah, fastest speed. Yeah.
Still weren't sniffing Xavier Worthy, and I think not that I had him on my list as a downer, or I still had an upper. I'll just say this, Chase. I totally agree with you, Jaylen Noel. Awesome. Also boomed up my board. Also, I think he is everything to Chris's point, what Isaiah Bond was supposed to be. Like they were scouting the wrong player and everything like that. So I'll leave that at that because we will have a wide receiver episode later on. But I want to get back to that conversation about Isaiah Bond. He needed to be the elite athlete he was saying he was going to be to rectify the idea that this is a guy who's been consistently falling since this draft process has really started back in January when the NFL season ends. People were talking about the first round. Then when you actually watch his tape, he was falling to the late second round. And now he comes out and is like, well, you're a good athlete, but you're not a scary, crazy athlete. Like third round to me is tops now for Isaiah Bond. I mean, does anybody disagree with that? Am I being too harsh?
I don't know that you're being harsh enough, to be honest with you.
Yes, agreed.
As I'm getting deeper in the class, I think that the demise of this wide receiver class is a little overspoken. It doesn't have the guys at the top, but man, I have a lot of day 2 grades that I didn't really think that I was going to have. So for him to fall flat like that.
Yeah, and there's people out there trying to make the argument, well, he's still fast. He's still 4.39 official time. I'm like, yeah, but that's not the point, dude. Like, this dude had to be something else.
Special.
The fact that he was bum in Texas. I mean, flat out, plain and simple. You saw it for a flash, saw it for plays. You never saw him put the package together. I'm not impressed with his route running to begin with, and you're not an elite level athlete for your size, for what you're going to need to do to be productive at the NFL level. So, yeah, that yes, we could take that conversation. We had to.
Is there something to what they're teaching the wide receivers in Texas? Because I mean, the knock on Worthy in them last year was that the route running wasn't great. They were fast, but they didn't run routes well. And when I watched tape, they all looked like they kind of came off the line half-ass and then tried to like out fast somebody. Is there something to what they're doing there in their wide receiver room that is costing these dudes?
It's Sarkisian. Huh? Look at what he's at. Look at the type of wide receivers he's getting. I want just fast guys, and that's all they're going for. They're not going for the nuances.
But you can be fast, and that's part of that's the problem. And I guess that's what I'm asking here. I mean, you can be fast and still be a decent ass route runner, or be coached into playing football fundamentally, and it doesn't look like they are coaching them that way at the wide receiver position at Texas, and I think that's hurting these guys. I think Worthy proved this year that he's an NFL talent. And I think he could have been better in college than he was even. And I think he could be better in the pros than he showed this year too, had he had proper coaching. It just doesn't look like they're getting proper coaching at the wide receiver position in Texas. It's just something
they don't run a route tree, Chase. I mean, that's basically what happens. Basically their scheme is they have a guy they try to scheme open and they get the ball, so everybody else is running kind of dummy routes, and that's what you kind of get, people running half-ass routes.
So I also want to bring us all in because as we get to the down guys, there is one, I think, common down guy for all of us, outside of Isaiah Bond. And that'd be the bitty Tez Johnson. Oh, man. So not only was his size at 154 like, oh, okay. But then when he comes out and runs only a 4.51, like it's a profile type. He's the only player in my entire scouting process I have no comp for, because there is no comp for. Plain and simple. There's nobody that small without having elite speed. And Chris, I know you were with me because we talked about this. Like, we really like Tez Johnson on the film. How do you feel about him now?
Yeah, I was cooling down going into it. So he's not a guy that necessarily has a dropper because I didn't have him as high on board as a lot of people had necessarily. Dan, I worry that we kind of fell off the idea of Tank Dell, and we got kind of swept up in the idea that these guys can go out there and do that. But the difference with Tank Dell was his ability to attack the ball, his ability to be able to be in contested situations, his ability to make guys miss, after the catches, and be able to kind of, stretch the field as well. Tez Johnson doesn't check many of those lists of those guys, these things that I just named. If he's not going to run a 4.4 or something, he's not stretching the field very much. If he's not making guys miss, he's not, with his agility, then what's he going to be doing? And then you look at a guy who's about 55, who isn't going to be, showing you the contested opportunities, isn't scoring lots of touchdowns like you saw Tank Dell do in college. So I think a lot of the things that we kind of saw in the other guys, the gadget guys, like these, Tutu Atwells and guys like that, who I think things kind of will bum rap, but those guys get easily stuck into a pigeonhole role, and I think that's what happened to him this combine.
The one thing you can say about Tez Johnson, he did have the fastest 3-cone drill in terms of changing direction, and in terms of getting open, that's more important than just straight ass line speed. Now, it doesn't help things though when you're the lightest wide receiver since 2010, for crying out loud. I mean, yeah, he is still this minuscule little human being, and I'm not minuscule despite my height because I carry the heft to back it up. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to run that slow a 40 time, oh, dude, you hurt yourself big time. He can still get open, but is he going to be able to do that in the NFL? Is he going to be able to get off the line against dudes and to be able to get open like that? That 3-cone drill helped him, and I think it was more that's more a symptom of how he was able to get open rather than showing like what he's something else that he's capable of in the NFL. He still can get open, but dude, he didn't help himself at all this weekend.
Yeah, it was rough. Chris, who else did you have on the downside here?
So some of the guys that kind of went down my board, I was looking for reasons to kind of, from production, and I thought maybe they had something like their tape. As it kind of going back to Adam, these guys definitely did get kind of affected by the combine. But White, the third from UNLV, look, the guy was very productive. I had some kind of curiosity against the level of competition that he faced for UNLV, and I thought maybe the production was real. Maybe this guy could do a lot of things. And then I saw kind of the 40. I saw some of the athleticism. I saw him actually catch the ball, and they were running around doing some of the routes running, and I wasn't very impressed with getting in and out of his breaks. And I think he high-putted the ball very well, didn't catch the ball clearly with his hands all the time. So this is a guy that I thought could be like a sleeper, maybe a guy who could be a guy who stretched the field. Ricky White III is a guy that I look at now as a guy who's going to be lucky to make a team. He probably will because he can play special teams, but isn't a guy I think looking to be a receiver 3 or receiver 4, even a receiver 4 in the NFL.
I put Adam up there because Adam, you had the same guy, right?
Yeah, no, I did. He's same story. I saw the production and was starting to get really intrigued by him. Watched him a little bit. It's one of those, I messaged in the group chat earlier today, right, where I was like, man, somebody needs to get North Dakota State some new cameras because it's just awful. It's awful watching prospects at that level. And for them, I was like, yo, but you sent
cell
so many guys
footage
to the pros. Like, why am I getting cell phone footage? To your point, why does it look like I'm looking at a gas station surveillance camera? But UNLV is very similar in that sense, right? So it's kind of hard to gauge a guy's speed. And this is where like getting small school guys into the combine is really helpful because I can be like, all right, like, are you fast or are you not? Like Marcus Yards was someone who actually was fast, but I wasn't sure watching the tape because the tape was real hard to come by. But for him, yeah, I saw the yards per route run. It was awesome. 1,400 yards, not this past season, but the season prior, and 1,000 yards this season. I was like, there's something here. But yeah, a 4.6 at 180 pounds. And when you're 6'1", like you at least got to give me something, right? Like if you're that tall, then at least be a long strider. If you're that light, get off the ball quick. Like what? How can we not do either? It's frustrating, but yeah, he was someone who was briefly someone I thought could be a sleeper, towards the top of day 3, but has quickly fallen off of my radar for that.
Yeah,
Chris,
the other two. Go ahead, Dan.
No, Chris, wrap up your other two, and then we'll move.
Yeah, the other two guys was Pat Bryant and Josh Kelly. Pat Bryant from Illinois is a guy that there's a lot of different receivers that Adam kind of alluded to that could be on out there that can be possession guys. So I needed to see something kind of separate you. With all these guys running 4.5s, some 4.4s, it's kind of hard for these possession guys that kind of run 4.6s or below and not necessarily have great separation on tape either. So Pat Bryant's a guy I think kind of went down, another productive guy in college, but didn't really see that he's going to necessarily produce in the NFL. And then Josh Kelly was a guy that started gaining steam, guy who's been in college forever, but then kind of went out there, has a skinny body, ran a 4.7, just looked terrible as an athlete in general. So look, the production can't justify the production as another guy who will get drafted.
Yeah, so it's a good group that we got to talk about. It is time for tight ends, winners and losers. And Chris, you and I both had kind of the same overview as far as this tight end class goes, which is it's deep, but maybe we were both left wanting as far as what we got as a whole. Now, let's keep in mind, Tyler Warren didn't test, Loveland didn't test, Elijah Arroyo didn't test. So some of the guys we would have want to seen test didn't get to go out there. But my thing was, I think it's a deep class relative to most tight ends, but maybe not as deep as we thought. I think maybe your sentiment was along similar lines there.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some starters in this draft, but I think there's going to be guys necessarily game changers or guys who are going to be impact fantasy-wise in this draft. That's a little more concerning. I think there's going to be a plethora of options. It still is, I think, depending on some of the fits and some of the guys' upside. But overall, not necessarily an athletic class that I thought it would be, Dan. And especially if we saw the receivers and running backs run, some of those guys, the sizes they were running and be able to produce, especially the outside receivers, and then watching these tight ends go out there, similar weights, maybe 10, 15 pounds more, and then run up, 4/10 longer 40s. Like, well, what are you going to do in the field? So definitely not as exciting as I was, but I think, overall still a good class.
Yeah, you're 250. I don't care you're 250. Get out there, run a 4.4. Let's go. Move your butt. No, but it was still a good class. So let's start with your risers of the combine. Who impressed you? Who moved up your board, maybe?
So the guy didn't necessarily super impressed me because I was already a guy that liked him, but he definitely moved up to my top 3 tight ends, and that's Mason Taylor from LSU. What I got to see is, despite the tape where he's not super productive in LSU, it was a guy I saw get open, a guy who was very smooth in and out of his breaks, that I see is the youngest tight end in this draft, has a lot of upside, skill set. I think he's still growing to his body, still kind of get stronger. So I liked a lot of the things I saw going in, and then basically confirmed it with the combine. I loved what I saw when him catching the ball in the different drills. I loved his ability to kind of get in and out of breaks. And I liked what I was hearing about, people are liking him in the scouting communities where he could go draft-wise. So Mason Taylor's a guy I definitely have moving up on my board and solidify a spot in the top 3 for myself.
Well, let me jump in. Let me jump in right there because I also had Taylor as one of my risers as well. He's 4 now on my board, not quite a top 3, but now he is number 4. And it was somebody who I knew, like, yes, you had the football IQ, 100%, no question about it. You know where to be. You're the son of Jason Taylor. You're the nephew of Zach Thomas. I expect you to know how to play the football game. But I had 2 questions on him, and one was we didn't get to see him run the 40. I do have questions about his long speed, how much he can really stretch the seam. And the other question I have is how productive in the red zone can you actually be? Because he wasn't very productive, and this past year he was meant to be that top target, and we didn't really see that come to fruition as far as production overall goes. Now, I wound up copying him to Tyler Eifert because I think he's somebody who's I can run those routes. I can get open. I can be a safety blanket. I have sure hands. I'm not going to drop the ball. And I think he's going to be a very good tight end. But I think fantasy-wise, look, it comes down to touchdowns. It comes down to volume. And that's all it really takes for a tight end 2 to be a tight end 1. But I think we're talking about somebody who's in the low-end tight end 1, tight end 2 range. But that he is my tight end 4 now for the class. So he was somebody who was a riser for me because of how smooth he was, especially in the gauntlet drill. Who else did you have?
The other guy is Jaylin from Texas Tech, a guy who has, like the size, 6'4", 265 pounds, tested out well, catches the ball magnificently for a guy that wasn't necessarily utilized a lot in college. But a guy I think looks to build a guy who can be out there block, but also a guy who can stretch the field. So you like tight ends who are going to be out there. And then you look at a guy, a tight end has some athleticism we talked about. So I like Kyers as a guy that I kind of had sniffing as a sleeper before. It solidified as guy as one of my tight ends that I'd be looking for in later rounds.
All right, I like that. Let's go to Adam on this one. So, Adam, who is rising up your board after this combine?
First, I'll briefly give a shout out to the later guy, and that's Jackson Hawes out of Georgia Tech. He's a transfer from Yale. His previous few seasons, he was a senior this season. He's someone who projects largely as more of a blocking tight end, but someone who I think showed that his it wasn't overly productive at Georgia Tech, but what I was able to find from Yale actually looked pretty good. And what I think he proved that he was at least an NFL athlete. And with being someone who can do all the things, can do the little things, that goes a long way to just at least meet thresholds. So he was someone who, again, wasn't overly productive at Georgia Tech, but met thresholds. Old tape was good. And I think
his ass off.
Exactly. He legitimized himself as an NFL player to me.
Yes, I agree completely.
I'm not saying he's like great. I'm not saying he did anything magnificent, but he was someone with a bad combine that could fall out of the draft conversation entirely. Whereas I think he did enough that you take him seriously as a draft prospect. I don't know for the fantasy thing that he's really someone we're going to talk about a whole lot. Maybe he's a good red zone guy, but legitimized himself as an NFL draft prospect. So I wanted to give him a shout out. The big one, I think a guy that a lot of people will talk about the combine was Terrence Ferguson. Tore it up, just great relative to the tight end position across the board in a class that athletically wasn't that great. The jumps were fantastic. The 40 was still pretty solid at a 4.63. And the size in terms of height is pretty good. And look, I know percentile-wise, 247 isn't anything crazy. It's not like he's massive. But realistically, in the modern NFL, that's starting to be pretty solid tight end size, to be honest with you, to where you can actually entrust a guy to do some blocking and some of the other things. I'm not saying I want him to do that primarily, but he's not someone that. I think Oregon had him listed at 6'6", 230, and that's a guy that you take off the field when you want to run. At 6'5", 247, look, am I bringing him in when I'm running? No. But am I taking him off when I'm running? Also, no, probably, to be honest with you. I think that you can at least develop him as a blocker enough to where you're not necessarily dying to take him off the field. And he can become a weapon with play action, which is really what you want. For a guy who was able to get on the field at Oregon for 4 straight years, starting as a freshman. Never dominated, but he was getting on the field at a Power 5 school as a freshman. So,
yeah, I'm with you on Ferguson. That's why I wanted to jump in here on this one, and not just because he had the most impressive 40 of the group, and for a class that we thought would be a little bit more athletic, it was nice to see actually somebody run close to a sub 4.6. But this is somebody who, to me, showed flashes in Oregon of that he could be a dominant, especially fantasy relevant tight end. Now, he never put it together consistently, had 4 drops, does need a little bit of work on being able to sink his hips and run off his routes. He does still kind of round them out a little bit. But to your point, being a 4-year starter with that athletic profile and being big enough where he doesn't have to be taken off the field, I think we're all huge wins for Terrence Ferguson, where now he's somebody who's jumped into my board of there's 6 tight ends now that I legitimately feel good about taking from a fantasy perspective with these upcoming rookie drafts here. So there's somebody I comp them to, and
David Njoku, who I got.
Pan out. So I have Luke Schumacher. Luke Schumacher is who I comped him to. And we haven't seen Luke Schumacher go off yet, but it's kind of similar situation where, yes, there were some fundamentals that he needed to work on. He wasn't a complete product, but he had the athletic profile and showed the flashes that you look for a tight end who could boom maybe year 3. I think this is what we're talking about with Terrence Ferguson. Like, this is going to be that classic tight end of, like, if he booms, it might not be till year 3. So if you take him in your dynasty drafts, this is somebody you don't move off of until you get 3-4 years down the road. It's a long-term, I think, approach here. Chris, you said you had him at David Njoku.
Yeah, I mean, has ran a similar 40. Njoku ran a 4.64, similar size, 246 pounds. He's 6'4". This guy's 6'5". Kind of inconsistent up with the hand sometimes. With the good athlete, shows you the flashes, but it wasn't really consistent. I saw that to you for Njoku a lot. But I think Ferguson has that skill set that we look for. Adam talked about and start kick off the show, the importance of this combine, the tight end position. When you're athletic, it can definitely pay off for you. So the guy, I think, has some more upside than some other guys might have.
Who else you got?
That's my 2 risers I had from my tight ends I gave you.
Okay. Chase, who did you have as a riser for this one?
Yeah, no, I'm going to agree with everything that's been said. I had Taylor and Ferguson. I don't know if Ferguson is the chief like Njoku. I don't know if he's going to burn his face off and play the exact same week. But yeah, I mean, he moved well. He caught well. He had a really nice 40, obviously, but then he had a good 10-yard split as well. I think he's going to get off the line well. I like Terrence Ferguson and what he showed this weekend. And then, yeah, Taylor, same way. We talked about, we talk about athleticism at the tight end position and being able to move and and when the top guys aren't showing out, when they're not going to even participate, these guys needed to show out. And I think they show that they can move well. And I liked also what Adam had. I had the exact same notes on Jackson Hawes here. He was already maybe the best blocker in the entire class at the tight end position, but he showed he's an NFL caliber athlete as well, to where you don't have to feel like you can't use him as a receiver in the NFL here too. So Taylor, Ferguson, Hawes, those were the 3 guys that I had my eye on there, because we couldn't have our eyes on Warren and Loveland and Arroyo.
Yeah, they really need to figure out a way to make it mandatory for these guys to do the combine. I know you can't really do that, but they really need to figure out a way to do it, because it gets really disappointing when you see these top guys. You're
a tight end prospect for the NFL. You need to come and show what you're all about, dude. You play tight end. Come show us what you can do.
This is starting to turn to the NBA slam dunk contest, where none of the actual players start to show up for this thing. Like, no, I need this. I need this data. You need to make this sure that happens. Mm-hmm. So, Chase, since we keep stealing your guys, and I'm going to leave all of us up here because I think I know what answer you're going to use. But who is your faller at the time?
Fallers were the dudes that didn't participate. That's where I'm at with that one. That's my Miss America. And I'll wave at that.
Number 1, but I'm putting you down anyway. That's
right.
Well, I'll put this out there because I know me, Adam, and Chris all answered the same way. And there's really only one true answer to this, and that's Gunnar Helm. Because this is somebody who's being talked about as a potential top 5 tight end, not just in NFL, but possibly in fantasy circles. And then he ran slower than my grandmother. So that really put a lot. I'll go to Chris on this one actually first, because Chris, I know you were high on Gunnar Helm pre-combine. So where are you at now?
Yeah, that's one of the guys that definitely was one of my droppers. Look, I'm hoping that the sprained ankle thing is true. That's what it kind of the whole kind of explains everything. Because not only was the 40 bad, everything looked slow. I mean, everything looked slow. He looked at my dad bod out there, like it was. He didn't look healthy, explosive. There were a lot of things. I was like, whoa, this is not what I saw on tape. Gunnar Helm's a guy who has to be able to threaten with the ball in his hands, has to be able to stretch the seams. If running a 4.84 ain't going to get you there, isn't a guy necessarily who's going to be I expected to be a high-end athlete, but a guy that had to be a competent athlete. And compared to the rest of the class, definitely tanked out there. Like I said, hope it was all the ankle thing. Hopefully, don't know what the dad bod thing was all about, but hopefully gets fixed by pro day. But Gunnar Helm was a guy that I had, still has some hope for. Guy who I think has great tape, but a guy that I had to question, are you a guy who's just going to catch the ball and fall down? And you guys know where I fall on those guys. They don't last long in this league. These guys are going to get tired of throwing you the ball.
See, but that's why I didn't have him as a faller, though, because, I mean, yeah, if he sprained his ankle on the false start, like is being reported, he still went through every drill. He nutted up, he manned up, and he gutted it out. And I think that if that's true, and then if he has a pro day that shows that, yeah, no, I am faster than that, and I am quicker than that, and I can move when I'm not hobbled on one leg, then that shows something to NFL teams, especially at a position where toughness is a premium at tight end. So that's why I didn't have him as a faller, because dude gutted it out from the reporting that we're seeing right now.
No, that could be fair. Go ahead, Adam.
No doubt. I don't disagree with that. On my post-combine board, he has fallen. I'm eagerly awaiting his pro day because I do want to see, like Chris said, like Chase said, I'm not killing off the idea that he is still really good and it was just the ankle injury. But boy, oh boy, if you get a 30-inch vertical at 240 pounds, you are not an NFL athlete. I'm more concerned about the vert than I am the 40, and the 40's bad. Like, that's putrid. Like, there's people at the local gym that are getting a 30-inch vert, to be honest with you. Like, that's the level of bad that we're talking about here. And for a guy who I agree, I loved his tape. For a guy with 1 year of production, I need it to be real. Because I'm genuinely, like, I want to like you, but you're coming in with an asterisk because you have, like, what, 19 receptions prior to now.
But he was backing up a previous NFL draft pick though too. I mean, it's not he's at Texas.
That's why
he's not. No. Yeah, he wasn't a backup at Lafayette.
Yeah,
I mean,
agreed. No. I'm not killing him, but I'm just saying, like, when I only have a 1 year sample on.
Well, nobody touched you either, Adam, too, because nobody put hands on him this year. He didn't come off the line. He didn't put his hand on the ground. He had nothing but free releases.
You need more information. We don't have a lot. We don't have a lot of information. Like I said before, we don't have a lot of clues. We need more clues, and this hurt. Yes.
Yeah, that's I guess what I'm getting at is, like, it's fine that you're a 1 year starter, and the context makes sense. I'm not killing you for that, but the reality of the situation is when you've only started for 1 year, the percentage that the combine makes up of the information that I have is higher for you than other players. Right. So that's like.
And real quick. And look at a guy like Evans, for example, who's younger, or Ferguson, who's younger. There's the guys who are younger, too, that has some upside and some of the similar physical talent. It makes you start questioning, well, maybe I like these guys a little bit more than this guy who has been there and necessarily didn't have that upside either.
Yeah. 6'5", 240, 484. I mean, my jaw hit the floor at his first run when it was a 4.92. I was like 44. I'm like, all right, well, at least you're not actually a 4.92, because good God, I was gonna be like, I need to get my when I'm watching the tape. If you actually have 4.9, so at least that was a little bit better. I'm trying to be fair to him. So based on the combine and tape and everything like that, my player comp for him for right now is Jake Ferguson on the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah,
that's kind of what we're looking at, unless something else changes in this.
That's a usable fantasy piece, though.
Hey Chase, can I give you a throwback?
Yeah.
His testing numbers are remarkably similar to Jermichael Finley, the legend of the show.
Yes. The generational
the legendary. One. The generational.
God dang it. Now I got to wear that. Now I got to wear that on our next episode.
For those of you first time tuning in, we had a long. I think we had Pat Fitzmaurice on. I think it was
no. It wasn't. It wasn't Pat. It was who was it?
We had a really big time guest on. And Chase goes, generational talent, Jermichael Finley, and wasn't joking. Said it serious.
He could have been.
Here. Well, that's going to do it for today's show. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. So we're going to be doing more stuff like this. Check out, we're going to have our videos out there on YouTube. Make sure you follow us, Operation Domination Football, available to in every podcast app. And check out on the YouTube channel, the FF Advice We have upcoming episodes like next week where it's going to be all about the free agency, baby, because we record on Wednesday, so it's perfect timing. We'll drop it on Thursday morning, and we're going to, we'll have the legal tampering period on Monday. Actual free agency starts Tuesday, so we'll have the initial signings for you after that, and of course another follow-up free agency episode, because I'm sure we won't get to all of it next week, the following week, and we'll get right back into our draft classes: quarterback, running back, receiver, tight end. We'll really get into
which won't change for Adam based on that.
Because dang it.
But it will by then, because I'll have pro days.
Oh, okay.
Pro days matter more in combine for quarterbacks, according to Adam.
Not for quarterbacks.
When they friendly stopwatches and familiar receivers count.
Well, look, when nobody does anything at the fucking combine, then I have to do the pro days.
It's
You ain't lying.
Just add on that 0.5 of a second to whatever 40 time you get, though. All right, so we'll see you guys next week. Tune back in. Hey there. I want to thank you for watching Operation Domination today. And if you're enjoying the show, there are some ways you can help support us. You can go to podchaser.com/Operation Domination and leave us a 5-star review. And you can do this on any podcast platform or on our YouTube page when you go to @FF Advice Network. This completely helps out the show be able to grow, and also leave us comments to let us know how we can curtail the show to you, because you are the most important member of the show. So again, go to podchaser.com/Operation Domination to leave a 5-star review and leave a comment wherever you listen or watch the show, and we'll help better serve you.